Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading the Phaedo. We are on the hunt for something called the art of the logos. Last time we got started in the defeating Cadmus, defeating the god Cadmus, defeating the argument that our lives, our incarnations, wear our souls down. And so while we might outlive many versions of our body, or we might outlive many reincarnations, we don't outlive our last one. We don't outlive the last jacket we die wearing. That argument. Meaning, maybe even if we had an existence, our soul had an existence prior to our birth, that doesn't necessarily mean our soul's going to outlive this death. Therefore, an intelligent person should fear death, should fear the loss of their soul, unless they can know and prove that our soul is immortal. So those were the stakes for this argument that Socrates set up. Now we also recognize that this is a kind of steel man argument. As far as arguments go, there's a debating technique called a straw man argument. If you are wanting to counter a certain argument, you can present a straw man version of it. Not a real man, but a straw man, like a scarecrow. Because a straw man is easy to knock down. So you kind of represent the argument in the silliest way. And then attack that. Now Socrates is not doing that. He's doing the opposite. He's setting the stakes higher. He's better representing the way of thinking of our friend Cebes. Now this is interesting. How? Because we are not just benefiting by listening to the arguments and reading it and following it to learn about our own souls and where we are going when we die, which is important because I hope I'm not the first person to let you know about this, but we will all die one day. So, to be rational is to ask the question, where are we going when we leave this place? And is there a way that we can prepare for that so we can go into that place in a better, more capable way? So we can fare well and have access to divine providence as much as any man can. Which is, of course, a quote from this text we're reading, the Phaedo, and how Phaedo was describing Socrates. And of course, how Socrates is thinking of himself too. So he must have a reason for thinking he's going to fare well and going to the place in a good state of being. After having learnt that which is important to learn and that which can last after our lifetime. So we're being rational, we're becoming rational. Some people call this entering the human race. Okay, elevating ourselves out of the muck to fighting about personal opinions and fighting for fighting's sake, philonikos, interested in opinions and not truth, so that's philodoxia, and instead becoming a lover of learning, philomethesis, but not just a lover of learning. How can we go from a lover of learning about things we see through our physical senses, the world of becoming, that grows, maintains for a little bit, and then decays? These three principles Socrates is identifying where we're reading. How can we go from that world to the realm of being, that which is eternal and immortal? Which is important because we need to understand that to understand if our soul is of that nature, and if that is the place where we are going to go. And if it is, what do we have to do here to prepare ourselves or to meet the conditions to be invited into that realm? In other words, what's the meaning of life? What's the kind of learning we're here to do? Paideia is the word. The Greek word, the kind of spiritual learning we're here to do. And that's being rational. Socrates is pointing out, hey, all of the human ills, the conflict, the war, the civil discord, your own internal conflict that can distract you from real philosophy and drive you out of your mind, this is all caused by not doing philosophy in the correct way, which for us started as a kind of belief, as a reason for us to listen to Socrates, but now we are developing our own understanding of that. Why is it the case? Why is it necessarily the case? And can these reasons be organized in a beautiful way to show that it necessarily and beautifully is the case that these things follow, that the cause of human ills is the opposite of philosophy? Lover of the body instead of lover of learning, lover of opinions instead of lover of wisdom, and lover of fighting instead of lover of phronesis. So we have two kinds of triads, one the opposite of the other, one the vice version and one the virtue version. And what makes the virtues, we could say what unifies them, what synthesizes them, is the art of the logos. The virtue side, learning upgrades to philosophy with the art of the logos, and the mastery of that upgrades to phronesis, a kind of learning that is eternal. So we're going from division, fighting, ignorance, blind loyalty to our personal opinions, our prejudices, to reason, to changing our minds, to learning new things. We've talked about recently how that can be difficult. There's a kind of appeal to cosplaying as a Socrates character, cosplaying as a Noah. Of course, not really Socrates. He wouldn't be like this. He never claims ownership of the logos. He's inviting the logos in. He's watching it unfold. He is as confused and amazed as us. It's not Socrates. In fact, he said, if our soul did die, if our soul did leave the self after we died, that would kind of be a good thing, because we would lose our ignorance. He didn't say the self dies. That's off the table. It can't be so. It's necessarily can't be the case if everything is from self, in self, and returning to self. But maybe our attachment to our individual soul has a kind of reality, but isn't ultimately true. It's a kind of illusion, kind of ignorance. But it can be appealing to strut around as if you know things. Hey, some people are attracted to philosophy for that reason. They want to own people in arguments, debate bros, that kind of thing. In fact, that's often what's taught in our culture. What's good is to be seen as wise, to have the image, appearance. But we're not interested in appearances, we're interested in truth. So we have to change our mind. We have to be okay with missing the mark. But the difference is with the art of the logos, when you recognize you're incorrect or you've missed the mark. By the way, missing the mark is the actual translation of the word amartya, which is mistranslated as sin, which is used to vilify people for missing the mark. You are innately bad, which of course is ignorance, which is vice. In philosophy, we want people to recognize, no, of course you're missing the mark. That's why we're here. We're here to learn. If you knew everything already, you wouldn't be here. And of course, no, everyone misses the mark. It's absurd to say that you're innately bad or sinful if you've missed the mark. The word is amartya, which is a archery term that means to miss the mark. If you miss the mark, you adjust your aim, you learn. This is important because making people bad or wrong can make it difficult to learn new things, to change your mind. And what we do instead is we blindly defend our ignorance so we don't get punished. And of course, punishment is another lie that we've been talking about that smuggles in violence. So violence is needed for oppression, but violence is irrational and unjust. How do we make it okay? Well, we say, oh, it's necessary for learning. That's what punishment is. It will make you more good somehow, which of course is bullshit. Doesn't work that way. It's a lie to smuggle in violence. So our question is, well, okay, if that's, oh, and by the way, violence goes under the category of war, civil discord, the human ills that happen if you are only attached to your physical body. Which makes sense. That's behaviorism. In psychology, if you reject mind, if you reject philosophy, those three things that these people who suffer from the greatest defect of the soul reject. They reject being, they reject logos, and they reject the art of the logos. All they're left with is the back and forth of physical movements in the physical world. No soul, no reasoning, no logos, no intelligible paradigm that gives us the conditions for reasoning. All of that which is most important wiped away by something called behaviorism, which is a kind of ignorance that's taught in psychology before it discovers the art of the logos. What's behaviorism? You do something bad, whack. Do something good, here's a cookie. Here's a cookie for doing something good. So it's using physical things to manipulate our behavior, which is stupid because we're not just physical. And if we were ruled by our physical impulses, we wouldn't be developing virtue. And in the arguments we're reading, we're seeing that, oh no, someone who has true virtue and phronesis rarely rarely gives in to the impulses of the body, physical pleasures and desires. Usually, you rein them in and you're ruled by your soul, as if your soul is something different from your body. So you say, hey, and we quoted Homer beating his breast and saying, hey, heart, you've endured worse than this. You can endure this difficulty. As though his soul is different from his body, saying you can deal with this. We are like that. In fact, last time, we got a question from the chat about the soul. What is the soul? And we said, hey, it's like a snowman. The smallest part of the smallest aspect of our soul, the reasoning and planning, should rule over those other two, the outward moving and the inward desiring aspects of our psyche. The love of learning should rule over the love of honor and the love of riches, is another way of saying that. Right? And so we can see, oh, the kind of ignorance that we have in psychology with behaviorism, or in modern philosophy, which is really the love of opinions or the love of fighting, philodoxia, the love of opinions, philonikos, the love of fighting. Socrates is specifically saying that's the opposite. And because we are learning the dialectic, which is the artful use of the logos, we can recognize, oh, those go into category B. What if philosophy doesn't exist? So, and because we are able to read the text at this level of integrity, because we have a good translation, the Balboa translation, with the actual Greek, so we can engage in that dialectic. The dialectic, of course, means two. So the dialectic is between Socrates demonstrating and defining the art of the logos and its importance. We have to engage in the next part. We have to do the division part, pick out the key terms, organize them according to the dialectical structure so that we can do the next part, synthesize it together and analyze it, understand the subject in a new way. In other words, within the dialectic that Socrates is doing, about the art of the Logos, we are active players. Because we have to learn the art of the Logos, and we saw in the last couple of episodes why it's so important for us to learn the art of the Logos and not just believe Socrates. If we're going to trust in the Logos, we have to have good reason to do so. We talked about how matching Socrates in this way, playing with him, is meeting him where he's at, matching his level of excellence. And he says, oh, it's like Hercules and Ionius, his partner. Doesn't matter who's Hercules and who's the other guy. We're together, we're assisting each other as heroes on this journey. Socrates is saying, hey, this is the greatest hero story. And we are seeing why. The stakes. And I don't know if anybody knows what is happening in our world right now, but in terms of in the time when this is recorded, we are suffering the absurd tragedies that follow when we don't have the art of the Logos, which Socrates pointed out over 2,000 years ago. What does that mean? How can he prophesize in this way? Well, we read in the text that to have the art of prophecy is tied to following Apollo, the god of philosophy. So philosophy gives a paradigm of understanding that's universally true and therefore can unify everyone, because it's not a matter of what club you belong to or where you were born or what team you support or what religion you grew up in. Doesn't matter. Understanding, by definition, is open to everyone. So it's a way of unifying humanity. Right? And Socrates points out, by the way, it's sound, it's true, it's understandable. It leads you to reality, which is itself sound, true, knowable. Again, and by the way, you can develop this as an art. And if you follow this, you have the ability to do a prophecy. In other words, if you can see the pattern, you can predict what happens. In other words, you can recognize the predictable patterns that lead to our cycles of failure or fate, as well as you can see the patterns that would lead to our health and excellence. So, with that kind of seeing, isn't it obvious that he would be able to predict the kinds of problems we are facing as a society 2,000 years later? Of course. But within the last 5 years, we have the translation of his text, and we are not so far under the thumb of oppression that we can share it. When the Romans and the Latin tradition killed Socrates and killed the philosophical tradition, 529 AD, began the Dark Ages, replaced understanding and knowing with blind obedience to authority, called it faith, pretended it was a virtue when it's the opposite, by definition. Then we had what's called the Dark Ages, and you would be murdered if you even had a text. And even if you did, you got away with it, it wouldn't be in a language you could read. But now we have the text. And even the recent translations haven't had the accurate translations of the key words. Fortunately, we can read both. And so we've been going back and forth between the Loeb translation and the Balboa translation. Because even recent translations have had influences of the church and the political powers that don't want people to think for themselves, because they are tied to a solution that worked early in our evolution, that is, don't think for yourself, blindly obey authority, because inside the cave is safe, outside the cave is scary with saber-toothed tigers. So that's where we are at in humanity. So a lot of people are depressed at the state of the world, but with philosophy, we can understand it. Oh, it's simply the final stages of a level of development where you're attached to group thinking and blind obedience to our ignorances, our false beliefs. And the insult is dog. You're a dog because dogs are just blindly loyal to whoever their master is, without what Socrates is saying, the art of the logos. You can't simply trust human beings without using an art. And Socrates says, by the way, if you do that, you'll get let down over and over again, because nobody's ideal. Everybody's between the extremes. And if you keep getting let down because you're not yourself learning the art of the logos so that you can judge human beings, you'll end up with the conclusion, oh, there is no goodness or sanity or soundness within. Thumbs down. You'll feel sad. There's no goodness or soundness or sanity within human beings. And we can call that the villain's arc. Or black-pilled or doomer thinking. But that's also a metaphor for the logos. If you trust arguments, even Socrates' arguments, without also learning the art of the logos, you will also feel let down by people who convince you to conclusions that feel true, or that are attractive, or that might seem probable with science. And so you might end up thinking that there is no logos. This is the worst condition, because if you end up hating and reviling the logos, as Socrates says, you won't reach truth and being, which is our primary task, to reach truth and being through the logos, and also to integrate that into ourselves in a kind of learning that makes us the ideal hero, makes us match Socrates, makes us able to read the Phaedo properly, makes us match the intelligence of the universe, match the intelligence of dreams, live the best life possible, enter the best, die in the best way possible, have the best afterlife, have the best incarnation, have the best virtues. All of these things, the integration of nous, reaching reality, through logos, through our understanding and dialectic, integrating it into our virtues, into our practice all the time. And that's a kind of virtue a kind of learning called phronesis. And what we can unify that whole process under one term. That's what we're doing at the moment, the art of the logos. The art of the logos incorporates all of those things. And so, we can only play this game recently. That's the rub. Of course we are suffering these terrible problems, because of those rare few who have reached excellence, and, as we're reading in the text, the same art of excellence will be able to recognize problems. We will find that. Well, we read that last time, but we can read it again today. The same kind of art that recognizes the health of something can recognize the deviations. If you're a horse trainer, you can recognize what an ideal horse is. You can also recognize where a horse has defects, injuries, problems. So if we lack the art of the logos to reach our ideal, like Socrates, because Socrates type figures are rare and our culture hasn't reached the level to value this, so it's not taught. The people who claim to be wise, those are the ones in positions of authority in our society at this point in our evolution. So because these people are rare, and because we only now have the actual translations, only now can we wake up. Wake up to philosophy, wake up to the art of the logos, and learn what we need to do to solve our problems, but most importantly, learn what we need for our souls. And Socrates has said, that's what we need to do. Look how greedy I am for this learning for myself. I'm not here to persuade people. If it's true, it will naturally be beautiful and persuasive. So that's what we're doing. Matching Socrates, matching the ideal hero, the ideal hero's journey, the ideal hero's story, matching the kind of intelligence that our universe must have, the kind of art that the demiurge, the daemon, and of course we don't exactly know what a daemon is. We know it's one of the key reasons why Socrates is being murdered. It's not part of his official spiritual tradition to have a voice from the self communicating through the logos for our benefit, a kind of guide that he's had his whole life. But if it's communicating for our benefit, it must be communicating through that universal paradigm of language, logos, for our benefit. So it must know how we are going towards our goal. So it must know about reality. And it must be, if it's communicating beneficially, we can say it's providence, and therefore functioning through an art, because art is what benefits. Art has to have all of those things. It has to have an ideal or a goal. It has to have a paradigm or pattern that it follows that's understandable, and it has to be able to be used to benefit the patient or the subject. So what an art necessarily has. So if we're matching the art of the logos, learning the art of the logos, not only are we doing what Socrates wants us to do in his last day, we're also potentially learning the kind of skill or art that the daemon has, which might be important for our evolution to higher dimensions. In other words, you want to get into the club, but you want to know how to dance. If you can't dance, you won't get let in. Or if you can't, you want to join the band, but if you can't play your instrument, there's no point in being invited into the band. The art of the logos would be the learning of the instrument. The band would be the higher dimensions of our evolution. So, a lot of questions are raised. Well, how come it had to get this bad before we could learn the art of the logos? How come it took so much time after Socrates? How come Plato didn't pick up the ball as well as Socrates? How come Aristotle failed so terribly? So we have a lineage from Xenophanes, the earliest philosopher that we know about, and we have some text from him. He was the guy who had the mantra or koan or question, what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experiencing right now? Or seeing and hearing, what is the whole? It's been improved upon. What is the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking? Or what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experiencing? Or what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experience? And what is watching? Notice these questions that we have gotten from Xenophanes are really playing into where we're reading now. Because in the text now, Socrates is saying, hey, look, I'm going to give you my personal anecdote. I want you to find the key pieces. I want you to solve the puzzle. I want you to try and be the dialectician. He's encouraging us to learn the art of the logos and not just follow him. And so what can we pull out from the story that we're reading at the moment? Well, he started by loving learning, but applying it to physics. Aristotelian thinking, by the way, modern thinking. You go to school, you look at your physical senses. But he wants to know causes. So that's a good impulse. That's understanding. To understand something, you have to know the cause of why things happen, what caused them to happen. But he realized, I'm not going to get the answer to causes in the physical, just purely physical thinking. And then he came across somebody reading a book from Anaxagoras, who said it's through mind that things are ordered. So this, as in mind. Mind is not physical, of course. So it opens the door to the sort of questions that Xenophanes is encouraging us to hold on to. What is the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking? Not what's the particulars, but what's the whole of it? Or what is experiencing the whole? Or what is watching that experience of the whole? These are different levels above the physical. The whole could be mind itself, the whole of experience. The particulars, the divisions, the adjectives we see through our physical senses, but go from the physical to the whole. But then we can add to that question, and what is watching the whole of seeing, hearing, and experience? Which might take us beyond even mind, which is another step that we can take in philosophy. And this is important because Socrates says, hey, we start as human beings in our physical world. Last time somebody from chat asked us about the soul. We pointed out, hey, there are three, it's like a snowman. There are three sections. The inwardly desiring, the outwardly moving, and the reasoning and planning. And this is directed to the physical world when we start. But we have to chase this one. Don't love riches to feed your desires. Don't love fame for how people out in the world think of you. Love learning. But we need to go from this physical world of becoming, this is our man here, looking here and looking back and forth, and realizing that everything in the physical world has a back and forth movement between opposites, growth and decay. It's a kind of maintaining of that while they go through growth and decay. Hot and cold, hungry, pleasure, pain, one of the key pairs of this text. But we can't stay here. We have to become a lover of wisdom. So how do we go from here to directing our learning to the realm of being? How do we become a philosopher? Particularly since if philosophy isn't valued, as it's not in our culture now, hopefully soon, if the opposite of philosophy, the vice version, what is false, the shadow of philosophy, is taken to be wisdom, which is our current culture, then these people who claim to be wise because they just contradict the logos, they debate, they put people down. These people claim they're wise because they reject the logos. There is no actual paradigm of universal understanding. Bah. And of course we talk about how that could unify humanity. Because it's and of course a paradigm through which understanding unfolds, which is the dialectic. That means we could have a system for learning, a system for spirituality, a system for philosophy. We could unify humanity. Wow, wouldn't that be nice? But people who like to pretend to be wise, often because they're imitating their parents who had the appearance of wisdom before we had logos, before we could develop the art of the logos. They think they're so smart because they reject the logos. Just opinion. And this is a problem in philosophy that we have to overcome. Hegel's opinion, Kant's opinion, who gives a shit? Really, who cares? Who cares what Hegel or Kant thought? Unless it can help illuminate the truth. But how do you know if it does illuminate the truth unless you first learn what the paradigm is? Same thing with the art of medicine. This is one person, who cares? Here's another person, who cares? You have to first learn the ideal of the healthy body before you have a way of making sense of each of the different people who might come into your office. Because how will you know whether or not they're sick or not? Because most people are not the ideal of the healthy body. Most people are not completely riddled with illness. Most people are somewhere in between. They've got some problems, but they've got some level of excellence. This is the art that Socrates says. Most people are between the extremes, just like you see very few tiny dogs and very few big huge dogs. Most dogs are in the middle. So why are we told to read Hegel, read Kant? Why? What the heck can we do with that? Nothing. It's a way of distorting the idea. All you can do, you have to walk away. This is how ignorance is formed. It's not made explicit. It's sort of implied that you come to the conclusion that, philosophy must be stupid and I give up, or philosophy might be just about using the names or authority or big words to prove my own personal feelings true and win arguments. Become a lover of fighting or debating. Lover of opinions and lover of debating. Because, hey, if nobody at this university can agree on anything, there mustn't be a truth. Now, they don't say it explicitly, but it's implied. You are supposed to figure it out or drop out. So this is a problem we have to overcome, but it's a problem we can recognize as a level of human development between. So humans aren't completely terrible, but we haven't reached the ideal of philosophy. Even humanity is somewhere between there. But thankfully, Socrates is giving us what we need to get the paradigm that we should have first. So when Hegel comes into our doctor's office, we say, okay, you've reached this level of vision, this level of understanding, and here is your certain problem from your culture, and here is your family, your personal representation of that problem from your family. I can diagnose you as right here. Yay. And now I know the art of the logos, so I can ask you the questions in a friendly way, in an inclusive way, to purify these problems, free yourself up, and also to perfect your growth. The more pure, the more you are purified from your problems, the more able you are to walk this journey up. To increase your vision. Hegel, or Kant, or Nietzsche, or Hitler, or Thomas Jefferson, or Richard Dawkins, or Jordan Peterson, or you name it. Everyone can play, because everyone's a human, and we wouldn't be here if we weren't somewhere in here. And to do that, Socrates is saying, hey, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to give you pieces. I've already defined philosophy. I've given a demonstration of the art of the logos to help my friends in their argument. But after I did, somebody came along with something that feels true from their own religious mythology about the soul being like harmony, or the soul not outliving your last physical form. And that threw all that in question. So you have to learn the art of the logos for yourself. You have to do it. And of course we said, well, this would make Socrates the ideal hero. Not just demonstrating it like Superman, not just defining it, which would make him a greater hero than Superman, but be able to give us the divisions so we can apply ourselves to those divisions, and then we can, after dividing it up according to the structure of the dialectic, right? So we have to play the game. After we divide it up, we can synthesize it together and then refer that back to that original definition we've got from Socrates to see it in a new way and level it up. And we're saying, hey, this can only happen now. Now is the time. Wow. Why? Well, because Socrates is laying this out. Then after, So we're talking about the lineage here. So we go from Xenophanes, who asked the question, what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking? Which we have improved upon and saying, okay, what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experience? Or what is the whole and what is watching? And what is the whole and what is watching right now? We've talked about that before, how we can improve Xenophanes' question. He was the teacher of Parmenides. Who was able to artfully diagnose Socrates' problem when he was a kid and prescribe him what he needs to do. And we saw that because in this series we started with Parmenides in the introduction. He passed on the dialectic, and we have a bunch of cool quotes from him. Here's one. So Parmenides said to Socrates, collect thyself together, thyself, the highest aspect of self, the highest self, by exercising more in that way that appears useless to the multitude, even today, dialectic, and is called by them empty talk. Hey, become famous. Hey, earn money. For if you do not, while you are still young, the truth will utterly elude you. So we got this, and this guy taught Socrates. And then from Parmenides, he taught Socrates. And this is where we are at. So he teaches us. From Socrates, Socrates was killed by the state when Plato was very young, so was not able to pass on his teachings completely to Plato. Fortunately, Plato wrote down what he could of Socrates, so we have these accounts of these conversations Socrates has, including this conversation. So we're really grateful that Plato was a very intelligent man and went out of his way to record these conversations. But there were certain conversations that Plato didn't. So we can see a separation from Socrates. Plato mentioned the conversations that Socrates had with blacksmiths and housewives and things that we can recognize today as philosophical midwifery. So Plato kind of focused on these sorts of conversations, using the dialectic to reach the truth about being or justice or holiness or beauty. He didn't write a lot about, if any, about the sort of application of the dialectic to its shadow. But he mentioned that he did have these conversations a lot. He did bring blacksmiths and housewives to tears, which is what happens when you uncover the cause of your problems. People who you thought were good and wise before the Ada Logos, before you were able to judge where they were actually. So you took them to be the ideal, but they didn't treat you in an ideal way, so we took the blame. So we ended up with a false idea about the self or the Logos or reality, causing our problems. When we see this, either seeing our images of our teachers the way they are, or seeing the implications our problem has had on our life, or on our family, or on our culture, that can bring you to tears. So we can see evidence from the text that Socrates was able to function not just as a dialectician towards the ideal, but as a dialectician towards our shadow, or a philosophical midwife, we call it today. So there was a kind of diminishing. And of course, if we can't blame Socrates because he wasn't around for long enough to midwife Plato. Plato, I think, was in his 20s when his teacher was murdered by the state. And of course, if Plato did not develop this aspect of the art of the Logos, then he wouldn't be able to teach his student Aristotle as ideally as he could. Aristotle. And our tradition is from here. Modern tradition. And what characterizes Aristotle? Aristotle is characterized by the physical world. He likes to categorize things in the physical world. He kind of plays lip service to the metaphysical, Hysical, or the realm of becoming. And this is what our tradition is based on. Now, what's interesting is Socrates is saying, hey, he doesn't know about Aristotle. He doesn't know about what our world is today from Aristotle's lineage, but he can see it because he sees the model. Socrates is saying this is not philosophy. This is the opposite of philosophy. So here we see a kind of break or a diminishment. So we have to go back to Socrates and pick up where we left off. Just like when you do midwifery, as a child you were learning, and then you reached a certain level, and then your family said, not in this house, buddy. And they said, no further. Last time we talked about you find the same thing at school. You might love learning about math, but your teacher can only understand up to this level. And then as soon as you start to venture out into this level, most teachers don't like that crap. Nobody. I'm the teacher, son. Know your role. That kind of crap. That not all teachers, of course. There are some that continue to learn. A good teacher will always continue to learn. Socrates says, hey, I want to learn from you. If anybody can pick up this dialectic, please do. That's where we are in the text. But unfortunately, because of the appeal of the image of wisdom, most teachers don't. Which is a problem, but that we can overcome. So there's a limit of learning based on whoever you're learning under. So when we do midwifery, which is the dialectic applied to our personal problems, we find we were developing until the family or the priests of the house says, you don't ask that question. But once we see that these people are not actually all-knowing, they're not actually the ideal of being, we go back to where we left off and we pick up our learning from there. We pick up our question. We pick up our curiosity. We pick up whatever kind of personal meditation we were doing as a young one. We pick up whatever instrument we might have put down. Pick up where we left off. So too, we are picking up where we left off within humanity. Socrates. We're going back to Socrates. Picking up where we left off there. And as we're saying, this can only happen now. So we're also recognizing some interesting things. So one of the things that distinguishes Aristotle is the physical world. And this is what Socrates said, and we talked about last time. We have to go from a lover of learning, which isn't bad, but where we start, the world of becoming, looking through our physical senses, to applying that learning to being. That's from Philomethesis to Philosophia, philosophy, which is the virtue of wisdom. Virtue of this part. The virtue of this part, you could say, is temperance. But it's also harmonizing everything. The virtue of this part, courage. The virtue of this part is learning directed towards being. That's wisdom. That's the virtue of wisdom. So how do we get from this to this? Because Aristotle didn't. And that's the tradition that we follow now. That's our modern tradition. All of the different... So he liked to categorize things into different boxes of the physical world. And he taught Alexander the Great, who was a great tyrant and so on. So how do we get from categorizing all of the A's, the examples, the kinds of flowers, the kinds of trees, the kinds of sciences, the kinds of beauties, to the? From A to the. From adjectives to nouns. Because now we're in the realm of being. Of course, we don't stop there. That's kind of where we start. We take this kind of learning with us to being. But it's not the end of the game. It's kind of where philosophy begins. Because it allows our freedom from our physical senses to do philosophy better. To understand the realm of a being, that which is immortal. Understand how it relates to our soul. Understand the depths of it. The aspects of it. Those are the ideas, not forms, ideas. And to apply that question, hang on a second, if there is a self-beauty, a self-justice, a self-goodness, a self-equal, what is the version of the ideas? Or what we can also see is that kind of takes us back to Xenophanes' question. What is the whole takes us away from our physical senses. Because we see, in the physical senses, we see A's, particulars. Particulars. What is the whole is a kind of question that might trigger a person's awakening into the realm of being. Because all of these particulars have to be in something, in mind, in self, in consciousness, in something that is non-physical, in the metaphysics. The kind of question that Aristotle didn't get stung by. And therefore we are suffering the implications of that. So it's not philosophy, so it's what if philosophy isn't? We have Aristotle and Hegel and Kant and Bacon and all these sort of European dudes and Nietzsche and everything blah 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 all the way to today. And has our world been purified and perfected? Nope. Who's running the show? The people with the biggest problems. Is philosophy the art of the logos to reach our destiny, the development of the virtues, the understanding of the virtues, the experience of being, what's true? Is that taught every day at school from day one? Nope. In fact, everything Socrates said would necessarily follow we are experiencing. So we are playing out this side of the dialectic. What if philosophy isn't side B? What if, and to mythologize that with a character, which Socrates is encouraging us to do. He wants to do with Aesop's fables. We might do with the Marvel superheroes. What if Spider-Man didn't get bitten by the spider and become a superhero? New York goes to crap, the villains take over, the world is blown up. That's where we are. So we want to go back to where we left off, because Socrates is saying, hey, I've walked you through Simmias's argument. What if the soul isn't immortal, but is like harmony? But I'm going to give you what you need to do this. I'm going to give you the account of how I moved as a young one from where Aristotle was, learning about the physical world, to a philosopher. I was let down. I realized I couldn't actually find causes in the physical world. I couldn't find the cause of why things grew or decayed. I couldn't find the cause of what maintained things in the physical world. In the physical world. It's not just adding physical things to another physical thing. It's not just subtracting a physical thing. There's a greater cause to what's happening. That's where science is. There are a lot of people who are interested in physics and modern science who get to that level and hang on a second, we ain't solving any problems here. We're not really getting to the cause of things. We need to bring in mind. They like the word consciousness because it's one step removed from mind, but they're talking about mind. And so that kind of question, what is the kind of question that Xenophanes gave us? So now this mantra we've been carrying with us, and our friends in the community, in the chat, on YouTube and on Discord have been talking about, they've been trying it. And we really appreciate that. Good for you. And they've been saying, hey, what I'm noticing, if I play this game, if I carry this question with me at all times, which is what? To hold a question is concentration. To hold it at all times is meditation. So this is a continuum of concentration to meditation to contemplation. If you can hold meditation for a sustained period of time, then you can join with your object of contemplation. And by the way, this is what Socrates is calling in the text, is our movement into the realm of being. That's the movement from understanding to nous, from dianoia to nous. And that's the true mystical initiation. You need to have that. And that's going to help upgrade. By the way, if you have to use discipline and practice to desire the logos of being, which we do, or to hold on with courage to what it says as true, not what feels true from our upbringing, and you have to work hard by reading these books and coming back to it every day and following along with these read-alongs so you can use it in your planning for your life, that can be difficult and effort. Socrates says it's like you're putting it into the soul. But once you do reach that progression into contemplation and you have experienced it, and if it truly is the perfection of being, if it truly is you in the highest experience of yourself, if it truly is pure beauty or pure knowledge or pure bliss, then it's going to be a lot easier to desire it. It ain't going to be effort no more. And this is tied to phronesis, the kind of virtue that doesn't lose its power. And by the way, if your virtues are not tied with struggling against the world of becoming, but is tied to an experience of truth and immortality, then it would be the kind of virtue that tied to immortality that can survive the death of this, leaving the physical world. Therefore, it's a kind of paideia or spiritual learning that can improve you as a soul and improve your next life, because its basis, its anchor, its what the paradigm it's based on is based in being, not becoming. It's based in the world that's immortal, so it doesn't die. So now we're understanding more of this question we've had, what is phronesis? And necessarily we have to go from lover of learning in the physical world to lover of learning of being. And that's the virtue of wisdom. And of course, if you get there, you can upgrade that to phronesis. In the symposium, which we'll get to later on, he talks about once you experience beauty itself, then you can start to give birth to and nurture the true virtues. So that fits in with the conclusion of the symposium, which is a teaser. And that's a little teaser for that's our little teaser for when we get into the symposium, coming soon on the channel. There's my little teaser music. But also we're seeing more about, and I was saying people in our chat have been carrying Xenophanes' question. What is the whole? Or what is, and we talked about earlier, finding it in our notes. Oh my goodness, it's getting harder and hard to find our notes now with so many of them. Oh goodness, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it now. We looked at Xenophanes' questions and we made notes because we talked about its progression. From what is the whole of seeing and hearing, or what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking? What is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experience? What is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experiencing right now? What is the whole of seeing, hearing, and experiencing right now? And what is watching? These are all... Here we go. Down here? No. Okay, I can't find it, but it's on the board somewhere. So any one of those, find what sticks for you and carry it around. And in the chat, people were saying, oh, by the way, when I do that, it has an interesting consequence. Carrying this question of Xenophanes has a consequence of diminishing the force of my problem. It draws my attention away towards this and away from this. That inner monster, the loud voice that communicates the pathologos against the logos, feels true, causes our repeating cycles of problems or fate, is based on someone that appeared to be wise and knowing, but was actually the shadow, was wearing a mask. So I encourage anybody watching, try it, carry it for a month. See what happens. And by the way, that's meditation. And if you hold on to it for a month, maybe you can slip into what we're really after, being. Philosophers, well, all people seek being. All physical things, Socrates said in the Phaedo. Everything seeks being in some way. But so long as they're physical, they will always fall short. And those two qualities, seeking being and necessarily falling short while you're in the physical world, means that all physical things you can see as the same, because those two aspects teach you to seek being. He said, because we don't start by seeking being. But if we recognize that, hey, things that are equal are never going to get exactly equal in the physical world. You can't draw a perfect circle in the physical world. You will never get the perfection of beauty itself. You will only get examples of beautiful things. By being physical, we seek those things. We seek beauty. We seek the good. We seek to be equal with the ideal. But we necessarily fall short in the physical world. Therefore, what we're seeking is non-physical. Socrates says if you recognize that, you can see all physical things are the same, because they teach you that lesson and therefore point to being. And that's the greatest benefit you can be to someone, until you learn the art of the logos, of course, which would be doing the same thing but artfully. So we said we should drop the word selfish and selfless, because the greater you can reach your self goals, self-full, the greater it overflows. So there's no selfish and selfless, there's just self-full or self-ousia. Are you in self-ousia? Because the greater you can reach that, which is the hyparxis of being, the greater you're going to be a benefit to others. And all physical things are a benefit in that way. In what way? To teach us that we seek this. But we will always fall short in the physical world. We will always fall short in Aristotle's thinking, Aristotelian thinking, or modern thinking, or empirical thinking, or physical thinking. All of these words, Stoic thinking. All of these words will necessarily fall short, says Socrates. But you can see this for yourself when you start learning and reasoning about what you learn. So we have to go from this loving learning to loving true learning, philosophy in the world of being. So we're seeing, oh, that question that we've been carrying allowed that doorway, put a foot in the door so we could go through. Because it's a kind of question that can open us to that. What is the whole? Not the particulars. Or what is experience itself? That's a question about mind. or soul or consciousness. Pick a word that you like, but it's mind, ultimately, which is being. Being itself is mind itself. The highest aspect, the hyparxis, which is why we call it self-ousia, or the hyparxis of soul, if you want to use the word soul. It's the highest aspect, or the highest, fullest flowering of soul itself. The soul that is all souls. The whole of souls, or the whole of beings that we study and we're interested in philosophy. That O is not whole. So now we're seeing more of the significance of this questioning. And that's what we do. So we start off with this. We trust Xenophanes. Hey, he was the teacher of Parmenides, who was the teacher of Socrates, who's like the father of Western thought. And everything since Socrates, famously, is a footnote to him. So we trust it. We carry this. But then the more we play the game, which involves reading the text, sharing our thoughts with the community, liking and subscribing on YouTube, returning to it, practicing it, doing these dialectics, which we have on the board, which you have in the Word document that you like. Obsidian is a fun one to have to do your notes and create mind maps. By doing that, we are going from trust or belief to our own understanding. So we benefited from it, and our friends in the chat did too, and the community did too. I kept focused on this question. I noticed I was able to do things I wasn't normally able to do. Get over my agoraphobia, or get over projecting that voice, that shadow onto others. It had a consequence of diminishing the effect of our problems, the effect of our problems. But now we can see why it does, because we're playing. We are raising to be heroes ourselves. We are doing what we're here to do, literally, according to Socrates. No, not according to Socrates, according to us. Which was Sebe's conclusion of the previous argument of harmonia. Whether it's someone else or me, I won't be tricked again. I won't be mistaken to conclude against the logos. I saw that I was convinced by what was probable or attractive, but it wasn't sufficiently, necessarily, and beautifully demonstrated, which we are tying to the dialectic, which is tied to the art of the logos. So now, because we're developing it ourselves, we say, oh, that's why it was working. Why? It was the sort of question that brought us this Xenophanes question that we've been carrying based on trust to begin with, which is the virtues. You trust that this is worth desiring. You trust that this is true in courage. You trust that this is worth our planning based on in wisdom, while you develop your art of the logos. So now we can say the reason why it had those beneficial effects that we experienced, that we benefited from, was because it's the kind of question that can take you from here to here, from Aristotle to Socrates, from the cause of human problems to purification from it and our perfection, from our fate to our destiny. By the way, all of these are duads, so they should go in our 2 skill tree. Fate and destiny, becoming and being, purification and perfection, medicine and personal training, physical gymnastics. We have a lot of branches on this skill tree that we can rub together to gain insight, which is fantastic. We're doing really well. But now we're understanding why it's had that beneficial effect. So maybe we're developing the art of the logos, seeing for ourselves. And also we can see why humanity's up shit creek, why we lost Socrates, why this is not working. Because we're understanding it. It's not this question. In fact, it's this kind of thinking can only exist when you reject those three things that Socrates says that those people who reject philosophy reject. What do they reject? They reject the existence of the logos, and we can call it the self-logos because we know that we have that word in the Greek now. We know what it means, only in the last 5 years or so. Self-logos, they reject that. That which can unify humanity in mutual understanding. So whenever we have an election, it won't be, oh dear, do we vote for this terrible person or this terrible person? We're like, no. What human being on our planet, who cares where they're born, has shown the greatest mastery of the self-logos? Simple. It's like, oh, imagine you were a billionaire and you had an illness. Wouldn't you ask that same question? Which person on the planet, I don't care where they're born or what they look like, shows a mastery of the understanding of this illness? And you would spend your billions to do it. Rational. Going from barbarianism, fighting based on ignorance and stupid opinions, and puffing up your chest because, look at my opinions. They are the common ones. Everyone in my society is Muslim. Everyone in my society is a Mormon. So I'm right. Everyone on my street thinks I'm virtuous. And I'm going to knock on people's doors and argue with them because that's what being a good Mormon is all about. Bollocks. Barbarianism. Conflict of ignorance. So this can take us out of there. Again, it's not a slight. Don't feel embarrassed. We all start that way. We all start somewhere between here and here. Everyone has their story. Everyone has their problems. Everyone has their version of taking their ignorance and thinking that they're so great and they're the chosen ones like a Mormon does and knocking door to door and arguing with people. It might not be Mormon for you, but it'll be something like that. It might not be Muslim or it might not be Judaism or whatever, but there'll be some puffed up self-image attached to this ignorance that we got brought up in that we mistake for the truth. Everyone. If you don't have it and you walk around like, well, I don't have a problem like that, well, I got news to you, you ain't a human being. Or you're mistaken. You've missed the mark. So again, this is not about punishment or blame or guilt. That's bullshit oppression junk. Let's throw that away right away. So they'll deny the self-logos, they'll deny self-being, or in the text it was reality. But we know, because we are understanding that we can also say being, we can also say mind, we can also say ousia. So these are ours. Why? Because if this is a triad, then we have a triad skill tree. This bottom corner of this will probably match this, and this, and this. So at one it's going to be reality, another one is going to be mind, another one is going to be ousia. That's the game. That's why we look for patterns and why we put them in our skill trees. Okay, so self-reality was actually in the text, and they will also reject the art. And now self-art we can see, because we know that by examining these triads, let's give it this one. By examining these triads, we can see, hang on a second, there is a kind of paradigm that these triads follow. So let's go find some other triads on our board. Look for some triangles. Looking for some triangles. Whoops. I've lost my mouse. Where's some triangles at? There they are. Okay. Okay, we've got this set of triangles, which is fun. We're gonna look at that in a bit, but we're looking at these other kinds of triangles up here. Where is this one? So we saw, like, with Apollo and Aphrodite, these two, while it's a hierarchy, while Apollo was first, Aphrodite is second, and Hermes is third, so it's like a 1, 2, 3 hierarchy of terms, there is a kind of a triangle way of representing it, because to reach Hermes, the god representing the dialectic, you have to be doing Apollo, which is rhythm, harmony, looking for the rhythm, the harmony, like we're doing, the patterns. What's the harmony? What's the patterns? What's the rhythm? Reading it in a rhythmic way. Can we get into a flow state by defining it and demonstrating it, by sharing it with our friends, by listening along to this channel? That's philosophy, but only in not just defining it, but demonstrating it. Do we gain our insights? Do we make it meaningful to us? Do we make it real to us? That's Aphrodite. That's the beauty in it. It's not dry like Aristotle. It's exciting. It's an exciting way of being that puts you in a perpetual state of wonder and insight, like Socrates. So you have these two things together that allow you to reach the hyparxis, the top of the pyramid, which is Hermes. So only by doing this can we awaken the dialectic, which we're also maybe saying is a key aspect of the art of the logos. So here we've got another triad. Doing your life's work in a worthy way makes you a philosopher, which is the virtues. You need to do an activity. You need power to do that activity to reach being. It's our goal. So Apollo is a kind of activity. Aphrodite gives you a kind of power. So we can lay these triangles on top of each other to gain insight of them, but we realize we can go from all the way down here. So if that's the paradigm, we can take that and apply it here. So if the people who are not philosophers, side B, our modern world, people who claim to be philosophers, claim to be life coaches, claim to be spiritual gurus, claim to be blah, 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 you name it, anyone who claims to have wisdom or understanding, they tend to reject the self-logos, reject self-reality. Hang on a second, these two go together to reach the hyparxis. So what we said was art, we can say, hang on, self-logos, self-reality. So there's art that unfolds, that when you have reality as the goal and the paradigm, the model, you have the logos, you have the understandability of the model, the structure, terms and patterns of the model. You need both. You need the ideal and the goal. You need the understanding or the parts, the organization of the parts leading to the goal. You need both to have an art. But we're throwing in the word self-art. Why? Well, these two together, they're both self-terms. So maybe this art, he said reject reality, reject the logos, reject, and therefore reject art. We can say, hang on a second, because we've been learning, we can recognize it's not just the logos, it's the self-logos, bud. It's not just reality, it's self-reality, bud. Making it enlightenment. You turn around with Usia, experience mind itself, self-mind. You recognize yourself. Oh my God, I can't believe, people who have this experience often say, oh my God, I can't believe I was wrapped up in my problems. I'm really this. I can't believe it. I ever forgot I was this. So if these are self and these two go together, we can conclude this art that he's learning, called the art of the logos, is actually the self-art, or the highest kind of art, or the ideal of art. So any art we could learn in our life, the art of music, the art of painting, the art of medicine, are versions of this, are diminished versions of this, are adjectives based on this noun. Or are all, so long as they're physical, they seek this art, but they will always fall short so long as they remain physical. If you start to include in your art of medicine the health of the soul, then you can go from Aristotle to Socrates. You can have the true art, because Socrates said all physical things are the same in that they seek being, but they fall short by remaining physical only. So all we have to do, whatever art or skill or techne we have in our world, whether it's music or medicine or, hey, the art of skateboarding maybe, if you can include the soul, include this as your paradigm, recognize, hey, within music, not only are there relationships between octaves and perfect fifths and kind of harmonies and rhythms, but if I can recognize within music the self logos, it's not just an octave. The octave is a geometric ratio, which is a kind of ratio of the self logos. 1:2:4. Hey, this ideal of music or inspiration, or where music exists and you hear it in your mind, is actually an aspect of reality. If I can tie this in with the self logos, the patterns of music in with the self logos, if I can tie in the ideal or the model in with self reality, and I can apply it to benefit the soul, I'm going out of the physical world of Aristotle into the realm of being, becoming a philosopher, doing our proper life's work, and actually can turn the art of music into a true art, a self-art. Same thing with medicine. Realizing the harmony within the body reflects the harmony of the self-logos. So you can use it to understand not only the body but the soul. And by the way your soul is, haven't we seen even in medicine that our state of mind, our feelings, the way of being has an effect on cancer, on our physical problems, almost as though they manifest from a source of mind, which could therefore be tied to our pathologos problems? Aren't we starting to see this in medicine? So if we can tie this in, realizing that, hey, how the patterns of the physical world all seek being, therefore you can see the self-logos reflected in medicine, and the ideal of self-reality reflected in the ideal of the healthy body. You can apply your art in the particulars to the body, but also as a metaphor or an analogy to the soul. Hey, this is your physical body. I can treat it with medicine, using my art of medicine. But to really find the cause of your physical illness, you won't find the cause in the physical world. Therefore, we can see that the kind of illness you have and the kind of problem you have is a reflection of the kind of problem your soul has, which is the exact same thing we do in midwifery. In philosophical midwifery and dream analysis, we don't just realize you've got a problem, we recognize the kind of problems that play out, that demonstrate in our world, that divide up into different areas of our life and divide up into different times of our life, come up at a certain time in a certain way that gives you clues, going from division to synthesis, clues about the kind of problem you have. So you find those divisions, you look for clues, analyze it back to the definition, it gives you insight. It's not just random. As we said last time, it's entirely possible to verify we live in a caring and intelligible universe. The kinds of problems that we have physically reflect the kinds of problems we're here to address as a soul. If you recognize that, you are doing what Socrates says is necessary, going from a lover of learning to a lover of philosophy, going from Aristotle to Socrates, going from an individual skill to an art using self-art, actually benefiting, not just putting a band-aid on a problem. And what's the difference? Well, you put a band-aid on the problem, you're addressing the physical symptoms, but not the cause. Psychology, modern psychology, tries to find the cause looking at the physical world. Oh, every time you drink, punch yourself in the eye. I don't know. Or give yourself a cookie every time you don't drink. You're trying to use Socrates calls it, the addition and subtraction of physical things as a cause. That's behaviorism. That's kind of what psychology was one generation before now. Modern psychology is pretty much picking up bits and pieces from this. Most modern psychology you can trace back to people who have been influenced and are taking bits and pieces from the work of Dr. Pierre Grimes, who has published a book, Philosophical Midwifery, should be called The New Paradigm for Understanding Human Problems. And it's interesting to see the people who are making progress in the field of psychotherapy just taking bits and pieces from that. Now the question is, who wants to play properly? Who wants to pick up the whole? And there are problems, like there have been psychotherapists who try it and realize it actually solves problems, which means they're not getting repeat clients, which means they're not getting money, and so they give it up. But that's a conversation for another day. So we're seeing that's the current generation. The current generation is slowly learning this. So optimism, spit out that black pill. We're getting there slowly. And we don't have to wait for others. We can just do it ourselves. On the Patreon, I'm hopefully going to set up a way of doing this. Dream analysis, applying our understanding of the dialectic to our dreams to actually do this. I'm going to see how that goes, whether it's going to work out. Probably have to be online. We'll see how it goes. But we can do it ourselves and with our friends. And within the Discord community, we can learn together how to do the ideal, which is philosophical midwifery. But the previous generation, behavioral psychology, or what they call cognitive emotive behavioral therapy, that's the previous generation of psychotherapy before Dr. Grimes. Notice cognitive emotive. They have to throw in something to make it not completely rational. Was adding and subtracting. And this is what Socrates said he saw 2,500 years ago. He said, when I started trying to understand the cause of things in the physical world, I realized that what science was claiming was, hey, if you have one thing and you add another physical thing, you've made one into two. So what's the cause of two? Adding a physical thing. And now you've got one pair. So how do I make one pair into two different things? You subtract. You take it and you put it over here. Now I've got one and I've got two. So what's the cause? Either adding or subtracting. But that doesn't make sense because the cause of two was adding a physical thing, but also subtracting. They're opposites. How can they both be the cause of two-ness? This doesn't make sense. That's where we are in the text. This is behavioral psychology, by the way. This is Aristotelian philosophy, by the way. It doesn't make sense. You're not going to find causes in the physical realm. By definition, like you can't find the cause of beauty in an adjective, in an example of beauty. You can't find the cause of goodness in a good thing. You can't find it in the particulars. You have to go to the. And just as there was a division from Socrates, after Socrates, into Aristotle, which is our modern tradition, another way of saying it is this is the Greek, and our modern tradition is Latin. They don't have the word the. They can only stay in the particulars. Their language castrated them from actually picking up what Socrates is laying down. Which is why we have certain key terms like dianoia and nous that we have to, and logos, that we have to use, and we're familiarizing ourselves with through repetition, through practice, through the virtues. We need it. Literally. And that's why we can only go back to where we left off now. Just like when we do midwifery, we realize, oh, I was making progress until my family said, no thinking in this house, or no contemplation, or sacrifice your self goals for our goals, or whatever. No asking questions about the divine, just be a good believer. That kind of thing. When we realize that as an adult, because we're learning what? The art, the self-art of the art of the logos, we can go back and address it with our self-logos and pick up where we left off. Because we have a new language that includes dianoia and nous and logos, that includes self-logos, self-reality, and self-art, that includes the idea of what's true as the ideal and what's false, and recognizing that all humans are somewhere within here. These are parts of the art that Socrates are laying out for us, allowing us to pick up where we left off with a new language. So too, we can pick up where we left off with Socrates with a new language. English, we have the word the. So we're not completely castrated by the Latin tradition, but we can understand why we were. Because of the problem with Socrates being killed and therefore not passing on this art to Plato and then Aristotle and so on and so on and so on, but also Latin not having the word the. So in other words, you could say we're learning the art of the self-logos, and culturally as a species, we can go back to where we left off, just like as an individual in our own personal self-work through midwifery and dream analysis, we can pick up to where we left off. And that's where we are in the text. So we are going to go into the text and pick up where we left off, recognizing that Socrates is not telling us this. He's giving us the clues for us to work it out ourselves, because we have to learn the art. It's no good just believing him. He's already said that. And what he's doing is showing him, where he says, okay, you know what? I'm going to give my personal anecdote, my demonstration of how I realized you can't find causes in the physical world. Then I came across some dude who was reading a book by what's the guy's name? He wrote the Hunger Games trilogy, Anaxagoras. So some guy, when Socrates was young, was reading a book by Anaxagoras who said, all is in mind, which is very similar to Xenophanes' question, which opened up a big way of thinking, because he's already been disappointed by the physical world. You can't find causes in physics. You just can't. You just can't. You just ain't. You ain't going to find it. But it was a kind of question from someone else who opened him up. So that's a kind of artful use of language. And so he's giving us his personal anecdote and saying, you have to find the division, synthesize it together, analyze it relative to everything you've been defining. And that's what we're doing right now. We're doing this. We're taking this, everything we've been defining along the way, Xenophanes to Aristotle, the nature of the soul, how come we're stuck in this modern tradition, how come we have all these wars and injustices and tyrannies, all of these things we've been reflecting on. We're taking this particular anecdote, dividing it up into its key parts and patterns, and synthesizing it together and analyzing it back to these definitions to gain our own seeing of them. We are learning, we are leveling up, this button, our understanding. We are learning the art of the logos. And literally, by doing that, we're picking up where Socrates left off 2,500 years ago. We're going back in time and picking up what Socrates left us. And we're saying we can only do that now because, just like we need the language of the self-art of the logos, we need the language of the, we need a question like Anaxagoras gave Socrates, or Xenophanes gave Parmenides, directing us to being. So too, we have only had the language in Socrates' work in the last 5 years, because we've only had the Balboa translation of the Phaedo in the last 5 years. So the specific language, and we're seeing that for ourselves, the specific language that allows us to do this division and then synthesis stage, allows us to develop the art of logos for ourselves. We didn't have those key terms. We haven't had those language. We haven't had those puzzles. It's like a Christopher Nolan movie that's been translated through Chat GPT and then translated through Google Translate into another language, and then some AI has pumped out a version of it, it's going to be all higgledy-piggledy nonsense. There's going to be a general theme of, I don't know, of Inception or Tenet or something like that. But it's going to miss everything you need to discover the meaning and discover the hidden question and the way of solving that hidden question. Therefore, culturally and historically, we are at a fantastic and baffling and curious and unexpected point of history where only now do we have what we need to pick up where we left off. With what? The logos in our back pocket, the language in our back pocket from the Balboa translation, and also from the work of Dr. Pierre Grimes, recognizing this and being a guide for Balboa, but also giving us what we need to understand the false, because Plato wasn't able to do that because Socrates was murdered before he was old enough to before he had enough time with Plato to midwife him from his problems. And therefore, Plato couldn't midwife Aristotle and then bring him into this sort of question, overcome where he was stuck, and bring him into being. So only now do we have what we need to pick up where we left off, which is the same, very same principle in the macrocosm society, within the microcosm, within us. In midwifery, if you get into dream analysis, if you get into philosophical midwifery, you must have an understanding of this enough to think it's worth doing, to play the game, which means you have an understanding of the self-logos, you have a language and an understanding of the art sufficient to go back to where you left off as a child, where you first got your problem, which plays out in your fate. Apply the art and the logos with the dialectic to go back to where you left off. And if we do that, we can solve our individual problems that we suffer from, escape our fate. We can do what we're here for, live a happy life, live an excellent life, and die an excellent death. Many times before our last death, and when our last death comes, we will have a knowledge and an understanding of where we're going. And balloons. So we know we're going to go into a evolved state of being, escape the cycles of reincarnations, as the Hindus call it. We're becoming rational, because both for ourselves and for humanity itself, we have what we need to solve our problems, purify ourselves, escape our fate, and reach our highest excellence, reach our destiny, perfect ourselves, and do what we're here for. And how do we do that? We go back to where we left off with the logos and do our best to apply it artfully. Isn't that great? What do you say, Owen?
Wow. Wow.
And that's what we're doing today. We're going back to where we left off in the text with this question in mind, with this seeing in mind, applying the logos as we go back to where we left off in the argument. Taking this back, is Socrates explaining how he got from here to here, the way we need to get from here to here individually and culturally. Because hey, if philosophy is about the world of being, then not all of us are lucky enough to have an enlightenment experience and realize there's something other than the physical. We ain't all that lucky. There has to be a kind of question, or, maybe meditative experience, or, maybe we get lucky with an experience like that. But for a lot of us, we have to have a kind of question and a kind of learning that can allow us to realize there has to be something there. Beautifully presented argument that must make it necessarily for it to be so that we can start to trust it, which is the start of the virtues, until we do get there through our learning. And then we can verify our understanding in our experiences and apply that learning to that level of being to even progress through that. So we need to go through, hopefully, what Socrates is presenting to us his personal experience. We have to go through a similar kind of, waking up or having your glass shattered and realize, oh, really, I can think about this other one in a new way. There's a whole different dimension. Really? Or if I really want to understand, there has to be a different reality, a metaphysical or a beyond physical level of reality, universe kind of thing, for me to understand causes, to really learn. Otherwise, how are we going to get into what we need to get into? We can start by trusting Socrates, but then we have to develop the art of logos ourselves. And that's where Socrates is leaving us with. Hey, this is my swan song. I want to leave you something behind, not a bee sting, but the best thing. You have to pick it up. You have to pick up what I'm laying down. And you know what? We can. So, for as bleak as the world seems, or our personal life seems, because we are simply playing out the implications of what happens if philosophy isn't, we have what we need to understand why. Why isn't it in the world? This. The lack of the language, the lack of the word "the" in the Latin tradition. The lack of going from the physical to being. The lack of having the art of the logos to purify and perfect. In other words, as bleak as it sounds, we can be optimistic because we have what we need to solve our problems and reach our excellence, individually, within the community, and within humanity itself. And it could only happen now, which is a huge puzzle. Because, hey, if you're watching this, why? Why were you incarnated right here and right now? At this point where you can turn it around for yourself, for your soul, for your incarnations. You can't just trust it. And that's the argument we're picking up now. Socrates laid it out. Cebes, you say that it's irrational to not fear death unless you can know that the soul is immortal and prove. So there's our knowing and nous, and there's our proving in dianoia and logos. Otherwise, of course, you should fear death. Can't just be trusting Socrates' arguments, because Socrates already gave him the arguments and he trusted it for a time, but then he was knocked off. Particularly because the people who, and going back to where we left off before, the people who claim to be wise in this tradition, the modern tradition, the Aristotelian tradition, specifically say, my criteria is I haven't mastered reality, I haven't mastered the logos, I haven't mastered the artful use of that through the dialectic to benefit. What makes me wise is that this doesn't exist and I can contradict it. That this doesn't exist. Well, this doesn't exist. And of course we can see this kind of thing. People who love to be wise, like you might know them, but they're really stupid. Oh, I know more about medicine because I don't think the medicine exists. Well, where did you get your medical degree? No, I don't have to. I can pretend I'm an expert medicine person by saying there is no art of medicine. I'm a Christian, what do they call it? There's some religion that says there's no medicine, you just pray. And of course, we know that that's neglect and you go to prison. You can't be a Christian scientist, they call it. There is no logos of medicine that I can learn. There is no ideal of human health that I have to study. And there is no artful use of how to employ it to benefit my patients. I can just be Christian. And then famously, tragically, this is an opinion that people have, that because we don't recognize that opinions do harm and everyone shouldn't simply be entitled to their opinion because it does harm in this way. Their opinion ends up with their child dying of a preventable illness, and then they go to prison. But again, we need to recognize, hey, don't just put them in prison. Understand what caused their ignorance. Why were they? Oh, because there is an appeal? Because we all seek being and knowledge? But in a culture that tells you there is no logos, there is no being, and there is no art, then there's no way for us to get there. And the people in our society who claim to be wise and clever just spend their life contradicting. Even, hey, the most famous philosophers on YouTube and stuff. There's no logos, it's just opinion. Or you will only find causes like our friend Jordan Peterson, even and people who sort of copy that tradition like Andrew Tate. It's the physical world that's the causing. Hey, look, I look at these physical lobsters and that's the cause. Therefore, it's okay to abuse people because there's a natural hierarchy and based on violence and aggression because I've seen it in lobsters in the physical world. And then you have other people who have their own ignorance that are poisoning the younger generation and manipulating them the same way, like Andrew Tate. Hey, there is no logos in being and therefore purpose and meaning to life. It's just the physical world. Therefore, if you have physically more riches as part of the soul and you're physically more popular, famous, then that's what makes you better, virtuous. The literal thing that Socrates defines as vice is being claimed to be virtue. Love of riches, love of honor. Look at my Bacardis, look at how many likes I get, and look at how much Bacardis and money I have. We need to go from realizing, hey, what Socrates realized, the causes aren't in this physical world. There is these things that are rejected by people who did not have the art of the logos themselves, so they suffered the greatest defect. Socrates was pointing this out 2,000 years ago. Imagine his vision to be able to see it so obviously, to just talk about it. On the day he's being murdered, his last day with his friends, he could just talk about it. What a great person. What a great vision. Say, hey, this is the greatest defect of the soul that we have to be philosophical and guard against. To say that there is no self-logos. To even hate and revile it. Hey, what happens when you question Jordan Peterson types or you ask questions of Andrew Tate types? They get mad. They get furious. The alpha bros on all of the podcasts, what are they like? They want to fight you. The all of the right-wing networks, what happens when you start using the logos to say, hey, there's actual understanding for how we can solve problems and see that these politicians are corrupt or your party is corrupt or doing harm? They yell at you. They think by yelling at you, which is a way of silencing the logos, that makes them smart. Literally, Socrates says this is what people think makes them smart. They yell or they debate or they reject the logos in all those different ways. They make personal attacks. Oh, you've got a problem, therefore there's no understanding. Look at how much I yell. Look at how much money I have. Therefore, it's my opinion that there's no understanding is right. They'll reject reality. There's only the physical world, so we can only look at lobsters. We can only do experiments. I think it's Bacon. We can only torture Mother Nature so she reveals her secrets. And therefore there's no art. We can't benefit people. This is my, like, as much as I do still, even despite this, I still enjoy listening to intelligent people, thoughtful people, even philosophers. But what irks me the most is they lack this. No one ever has changed. Any philosopher on a podcast or a channel, a YouTube channel, they just walk away with the same opinions they walked in with. The philosophers don't change. The audience doesn't change. The comments, they're all like, yeah, I agree with you. Well, you always did agree with him. Without pointing out, hey, this isn't my opinions, as Socrates says, this is the self-logos from the self. Without realizing, hey, there is a reality that we seek and then and is the same nature as the hyparxis of our soul that we need to experience before we die. And by the way, the art and practice of that is the same as the art and practice of death. Therefore, true philosophy is the art and practice of death. And by the way, you have to learn the art, because if you don't, you'll end up getting confused and hate humans, or end up hating the logos, and then you won't reach reality. Socrates said all this. He said it. And now we can pick up where he left off and read it. And so on these podcasts, there's no artful use. No one is benefited. Problems aren't solved. The world is not made better in even if it's a big philosophy show where philosophers are invited from different universities and different countries. They talk at each other. They talk past each other. There's no dialectic. No one is improved. No one is healed. There isn't a universal understanding they come to. There isn't a universal insight about the nature of reality and humanity they come to. And there's no one made better, including our world. I've never seen a podcast or a YouTube conference or a philosophy conference in which the world was made better. And that's what pissed me off because I mean, there's a lot that I like about them, because of course I'm not blaming them, because everyone is somewhere between here and here. And it's only in the last 5 years that we could pick up where Socrates left off. So it's not about blame, but I'm just my personal experience. That's what annoyed me the most. You're not solving the world's problems when you could, because that's what art does. But that's what Socrates is doing. So we don't have to listen to moderns who are just playing out the implications of what Socrates is saying if philosophy isn't. Because we have this book, we have this channel, we have this translation, and we can do it. This is so what we are reading in this forum in Socrates' prison cell is the greatest YouTube philosophy forum. The greatest YouTube podcast is happening right now. 2,500 years ago. In Socrates' prison cell, where he is defining, demonstrating, and dividing up for us the self-logos, self-reality, together the self-art. He's saying, hey, I'm going to be going soon. I need to leave you this behind. And it may have taken us 2,500 years, but we can pick it up. Now's our time. We just have to go back to where we left off. With that in mind, with that goal, and with that vision and seeing, let's pick up where we left off in the text and look for all of this and more in our reading. Let's jump in. We're jumping in and picking up where we left off. Oh, the poetry of that. Let's go back to how he introduced this. So this is the Steel Man section of the introduction. So you have to start where you at. Is this where you're at, CBs? Not just... Okay, this is interesting as well. He's not just saying this is this where you're at, outlining his philosophy. He is doing it in a better way. So we say, oh, that's a steel man argument. The opposite to a straw man argument. To present the other person's argument as in a straw way, which is easy to knock down. But there's something else we can see about this. For Socrates to be able to present a steel man argument means he understands where CB's is at better than he does. What do you think about that? In one way you can say, yeah, of course, a doctor understands the health of the body better than the patient does, even though it's his body. But think about it this way. Imagine you had a worldview that you thought was right. I mean, we all do. We all believe our own beliefs, which is why I chuckle when I come across someone saying, you know what? I'm a realist. That always makes me laugh. Because it means I agree with all of my own personal beliefs. Yeah, of course you do. They're yours. I make myself laugh sometimes. But imagine if somebody came along and was able, like Socrates, to show an understanding of your whole worldview better than you could. Imagine if you were a nihilist and you thought, oh, there is no meaning. Like right down the bottom of the possible ways of understanding. There's nothing, everything is just illusion. And then someone came along and said, no, this is your position. Your worldview would be shocked because it can't all be illusion, because here is somebody else showing an understanding of your whole thing. Or if you're a relative, ever our beauty is in the eye of the beholder, a relativist. It's just all relative to your own perspective or your own opinions. What if they were to present your whole worldview? This is your way of thinking, right? Well, wouldn't that be a shock? And they were also able to present, okay, this is your way of thinking. I understand it even better than you, but here's another one above. Better. More true. It'd be a shock, right? The kind of good kind of shock that you might need to shake yourself out of your depression or your disillusionment or your doomerism or your blackpillism or your nihilism or your relativism, all of those ways of thinking that we don't really want, we just think is true. So Socrates, by knowing the art of the logos and therefore knowing the paradigm, is able to not just know it, but be able to give proof, give logos of it. Interesting, right? All right, so let's go back. So he's saying, let's go back to the introduction. We have, we don't want to suffer fate. We want to reach destiny, and he's tying destiny with logos. We have to, and we're following the logos of self, which is beyond belief. So it's dropped in a few key terms that reflect our own understanding all at once here, which is cool. He goes on to say, we have to demonstrate that our soul is immortal and indestructible. So let's give this a green. So that if a philosophic person is about to die, they can be supremely confident in the face of death that they will live a better life in Hades, in the next world, next place, than if they hadn't lived according to virtue. If they lived in a philosophical way, this is the best possible way they could have lived, and therefore they're in for the best possible incarnation or evolution into a higher level of incarnation. So then he gives the steel man argument. Even if the soul is mighty and a divine idea, entering the human body might be the beginning of her destruction, as though being human is a disease. We have to know and give logos. So it's proof, but understanding, logos, proof that the soul is immortal. Otherwise, it's intelligent to fear the extinction or the end of our soul upon the end of this life. Notice he goes, you can add or subtract anything you wish to this argument if I haven't nailed you down, which is curious because he goes on to say, looking for causes in the physical world is to do with adding or subtracting. Isn't that cool? So what do we see? We see certain key terms repeated. If you're familiar with screenwriting or you're familiar with songwriting, you'll know that repetition is a key tool. Drop these two terms in twice, and then later on, we're going to drop them in again. There is nothing I want to add or subtract. Okay? Socrates was self-absorbed. That's interesting. So maybe he's in a state of contemplation. Yes, contemplating something. So I wonder where he went for that moment. Now, Phaedo might not be able to see where he went. He might not be able to recognize it himself. But Phaedo's physical description, we might be able to infer that he has left his body, perhaps, if he said that's doing philosophy correctly, if that's where better reflection happens, which is actually a pattern in all of Plato's works about Socrates. Socrates didn't write anything down, tragically, unfortunately. Plato did. And there are lots of people describing Socrates standing still or standing under a tree for a few days or these sorts of things that they say, oh, he must have had good physical endurance, using the physical world of becoming to explain the cause of him being able to do these feats. But we as readers can recognize, oh no, we've listened to what he said. He's obviously not in his body. It's not toughness of the alpha male. Oh, look how much I can punch or how much I can stand in the cold. No. That would be looking for a physical cause, adding or subtracting physical elements. Behaviorism. The soul is harmony. The soul is a byproduct of the physical. Harmonia argument. Modern physics. We can recognize that's not what is happening. He's not in his body. He's doing philosophy. So that's a cool thing we can take with us in our back pocket as we listen to how people describe how they appear to him, and we can reckon, we can look at these people and say, oh, you're prescribing a physical cause to his state of being. Interesting. You might be missing the mark. Socrates. It is no thoughtless matter which you seek, Cebes. The cause of generation and destruction needs to be wholly investigated. So, if our soul is immortal, what's the other word? Immortal and indestructible. We have to see what's the cause of generation and destruction is, and if this cause extends to our soul. I will give to you my personal experience after, should something I say come to light as useful or beneficial, make use of it to persuade us. Notice he's saying you play, you learn the art of the logos, give it a shot, play. That's what we're doing here, right? We're reading in a new way where we're playing. We're the active participants. We are the adventurers.
You're a wizard, Harry.
We're accepting the quest. CB says, I'll play, I'll do it. Listen then, I will tell you, CBs, for when I was younger, in a strange way, I was eager to possess that wisdom that they call the study of physics. In what way, why do things come to be? Okay, so we've gone through that last time. Maybe through the physical senses, we have a memory of things, and then we develop opinions, and then we sit in quietness, and then from that quietness we get insight or knowledge. So by the adding of eating and drinking, men grew. So adding and subtracting. Same thing. So not just with physical things, like you become taller if you eat more food because you're adding more substance. So that it goes to your bones. But of course that falls down, doesn't it? If you're a short person, doesn't matter how much you eat, you're not putting on more bones the way he thought it was. When you eat meat, you're adding flesh. When you eat bones, you're adding bones and that kind of thing. It doesn't really work that way. So why do we only grow to a certain height? Doesn't matter if we eat lots of meat and bones. There must be some other cause for us to be the height that we are, not just a physical thing added in. Behaviorism. physical causes ain't going to cut it. We need another way of understanding why we are the way we are. So even 1 and 2, adding 1, subtracting, that sort of thing. We went through that today. Being brought near, you bring it near, it becomes 2. And you have that pair and you move it away, you've got 2 different things and no longer a pair. So by being taken away and by being added is the cause of 2-ness. That seems to not work either. So then he came across someone reading a book from Anaxagoras, who wrote the original Dracula story, I think, who said it was through mind that the cosmos is ordered, the cause of all. So this elevated a different class of questions. Notice, a bit of information, a kind of belief or trust or a logos from somebody else that could awaken him to another dimension of thinking. And we talked about how there needs to be something to take us from this guy, looking back and forth of his physical world, to understand why we have the things the way that they are in the world of becoming, to something to ask the questions about being. You need to go from a philomathesis, lover of learning, to a philosophia, lover of learning directed towards being, lover of wisdom. And of course, we don't stop there. And we recognize, oh, that's kind of Zeno's question. Can play that role for people too. So, mind is the cause of all. That means if mind is ordering, it must be ordering something the best way. So he reasoned that, well, if it's not just adding meat and getting tall and tall and tall and tall and tall and tall and becoming a giant, depending on how much you eat, we must be ordering according to what's best for us by some greater intelligence, some mind. Notice N-O-U-N. Nous. Noon. So that's the kind of mind that can apprehend being. So it's opening the door to being. So if the mind is what orders, it has to direct everything in the best way that it should be in. So there's a standard of excellence for what it should be, acted upon, or it's acting. So these are the 3, kind of reflecting growth, decay, and maintaining, acted upon, acting itself, or being. Out of this logos, what is excellent or best? So now we have our, this word is highlighted, so maybe that's a message from the translator to look up this particular word. It might be significant. And that's part of playing the game. Especially if it's a key word that's central for the passage. The word is Ariston. Ariston means a morning meal, breakfast. He wants to find what he should eat for breakfast. What? Why is that breakfast? Morning meal, breakfast, taken at sunrise. Breakfast? Let me show you what I'm looking at. Morning meal, breakfast. Okay. So he's talking about breakfast. He wants to know so if the mind organizes things, he organizes things according to what's good for breakfast.
What?
That doesn't make sense.
What in the heck are we talking about here?
I don't know, Joe. Ah, okay, it's the other one. Okay. Right. Wrong word. Should look at the one underneath. Best. Whoops. Okay. Of person. My mouse is being silly. Why? I know. Here we go. Best. Best. Best, finest, most excellently. And then this one. Best, bravest. Best, finest. Best and most excellent. Okay, so it is best and most excellent. Let's just try with this one here just in case. Ariston. Please don't talk about breakfast. Breakfast! Oh no. Not breakfast. So when we copy from the text, we miss the little umlauts and things. So we don't want this one, we want this one. Which is
Aristos best.
Aristos best. Aristos. 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 Oops. Aristos means best. Best. Yeah, okay, so we have it. It's ours. So, what's best? So, there's the standard of excellence or best. That's what we have to investigate. And it's the same... Oh, my mouse is being funny today. The same logos will necessarily recognize that which is worst. Whoops. For selves belong to the same knowledge. If you know what's best, you can also recognize what's worst. Makes sense. So I reasoned about these ways. I believed that I truly discovered Anaxagoras, the master of the cause of beings. So now we've got it. He's gone to beings. He's gone from Philomathesis, lover of learning, to focused on beings, wisdom about beings. Onton, which is being, according to his self, nous. And he would tell me, first of all, on the one, oh God, whether the earth is round or flat. And then when he told me, he would thoroughly explain. Okay, let's jump into the other translation because it's a little bit easier to read. And then go back to catch the keywords in the Balboa. Here we are. Oh yeah, we're actually here. So let's go back and get those keywords. Because we got that last time. The keywords, cause of beings, according to self nous, of course. So it's not just nous. He's making sure to talk about the self. So it's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's not just curious that we have a cognitive function. We have image thinking, we have beliefs and opinions, we have understanding, dianoia, we have nous. These are different skills or cognitive functions that we have. It's not just curious that we have the cognitive function of nous. It's to do with the self. Self is having nous. This is key. We got to keep it in mind. We're not doing this because it's, as an exercise, as a logical exercise. We want to know about the self. You. Me. What are we? What's all this? And why is all this? Something tied to the self. Tying it to the self makes things meaningful to us. He would tell me whether the earth is round or flat. Anaxagoras will tell me whether the earth is round or flat. And when he had told me, he would thoroughly explain not only the cause, but the necessity. So we've got two big terms. the cause and the necessity by explaining that which is better, that it is better to be self in such a way. Okay, so if mind is the cause of everything, Socrates is inferring that it must be best for mind to organize it that way. So there's the cause, and that gives it the necessity. Why is it necessary that the world is flat or round? Why this way and not the other way? Because that is what is better. So by having the idea of best or better or excellent, you have what you need for necessity. You have the paradigm, you have the standard upon which you can judge whether or not it's necessary, because it's either best for it to be that way. Whether it was better to be self in such a way. Now, self-intellect. So, the self that you can reach with this kind of way of thinking is self-nous. So we have autos and this suffix which makes it self-intellect. Better to be self-intellect. So that's a level of apprehension of the self as being. I'm not my physical body, I am mind itself. And it's best for mind itself to be in this kind of a way, having created, having caused the world to be round or flat. Which is interesting, because we have in our back pocket this idea that, hang on a second, yeah, that's an enlightenment experience. That's a level of being up that ladder of the logos, the good one. That's the Taoist experience of enlightenment, depending on, well, you can have degrees of participation or experience of nous, being, beauty itself, justice itself, all the way up to the hyparxis, self-ousia. And of course, we can recognize in philosophy, there is the world of becoming, this bottom triangle, bottom corner, the world of being, and of course, the ultimate oneself. So maybe Socrates is talking about his journey from learning into philosophy, but we can also recognize there might be a self that he's yet to discover. So it's better for self to be in such a way, and if he said self was in the middle, he would thoroughly explain it was better for self to be in the middle. I guess the middle of round and flat. And if he would have revealed these things to me, that I was prepared never again to long for another kind of cause. He's satisfied. And that I was truly prepared to learn by inquiry in the same way about the sun and the moon and the other heavenly bodies. What kind of inquiry? That it's arranged by mind, self-nous in some way, therefore according to a standard of what is best and excellence. Therefore, that's what's the cause and its necessity for it to be that way. Pretty cool. Notice when we're in the physical world, we don't have these things. Things are just the way they are because the physical world is just randomly bumping in. It's just chaos, right? Look at the presidential election. Isn't it just chaos? Look at the world. Isn't it just chaos? People's ignorance bumping heads against each other for all of time. What is the point of this nonsense? Why even try and save the world from tyranny, from destruction, from genocide and extinction? Well, maybe because you're only looking at the physical world, the back and forth, the adding and subtracting. Here, this way of thinking, that in which you introduce mind, which for a long time is banned from Aristotelian thinking, banned from colleges. It's not allowed to talk about mind in a physics class. You can't put it in a test tube. You can't test it with physical senses. But opening it up allows you to ask questions about what's the ideal, what's the best and most excellent, allows there to be some intelligence as the organizing principle, and therefore allows you to understand through necessity. Why is it necessary for it to be this way? People who reject mind, there isn't a necessity. It's just stupid or dumb or meaningless or pointless or irrational or even evil. Don't want that one. Because that, actually evil, it's necessary for bad things to exist because there is a super intelligent force that isn't acting intelligently. So it's a contradiction. It's acting in a harmful way. It's all of those things that we associate to ignorance that we talked about today: punishment, violence, inflicting harm, all of the things that does not make things better, we attribute to a greater intelligent force, and we give it the name. We give it supernatural powers, and we call it the devil, or call it evil. Which is, of course, applying the back and forth of opposites, good versus bad, of the physical world to the metaphysical. It's missing the mark, fundamentally, because it's a different kind of logos to do with the ideal intelligence and art. You can't apply the ignorance of the human realm to the divine, and therefore, but call it, it's a back and forth. In the same way the physical world is a back and forth of opposites, so too is the divine. There's God and there's the devil, and they fight each other, and they zap people and they cause cancer and stuff like that. Okay, we have to avoid that kind of way of thinking. It's not rational, and also it can justify violence, because if you have a way of understanding problems without the art of the logos, therefore you can understand problems, but you're not missing the mark because of this, because all humans are somewhere between what's true and false as part of being humans, and therefore if we recognize how and why you missed the mark, that gives us a starting point to apply the logos, the same way Socrates is looking for that starting point to apply the art of the logos with CBs in this conversation we're reading, and therefore we can benefit anyone no matter where they're at. If you reject the art of the logos and you apply physical back and forth thinking to the metaphysical, you say, oh no, the reason why you have a problem is because you're bad, or the devil, or evil, and therefore there's no art of the logos, because that would require me to learn to be able to cast judgment. I don't want to do that. I want to cosplay as knowing and kill people who disagree with me because of my problem. So what do? You can't reason with the devil, so therefore we have a way of justifying injustice, hurting people, because you can't make them better, because evil exists. Notice there is no evil in Socrates' thought or the ancient Greek thought. However, we could say, that kind of way of thinking is here. There is a kind of rationality. We can understand why they apply that, but they're not yet reached the level of logos and being and so on. So that's where they're at. And of course, the kind of evil, they're Catholic or they're Muslim or they're Judeo, or wherever it got, whatever Abrahamic tradition or whatever, what's the guy's name? Zoroastrian, he thought this way. Whatever their particular personal introduction of this ignorance would be their problem too. So we can put them there and there, therefore that's where you are. But of course, we can help them, but we shouldn't give them armies. That's definitely not, because we're saying, by the way, you're not here and here. We're going to give you an army because we think you're here. You don't have a problem, and you're actually seeing the truth by assigning the cause of problems to some rational but irrational supernatural power that seeks badness somehow for some stupid reason. So again, applying the art of the logos to understand the cause of problems, both personally and if those persons have power, how they play out to affect our planet and our species. as a whole. So going back to Socrates, where he left off, if he, I would prepared. Okay, never again long for another kind of cause, and that I was truly prepared to learn by inquiry. Okay. Now, in the same way, why is that highlighted? I'm going to find what this word here means.
Pevsomenos.
Pevsomenos. Pevsomenos means learn something from a person. Inquiry about one person from another. Learn by hearsay. Okay. Right, so I think there's two parts of that word. Menos and... Is that an F? Menos? I didn't think there was an F in ancient Greek. Alright, so learn from another person. Okay, so he's learning from another person. About the sun and heaven. Okay, about the sun, the moon, the heavenly bodies in the same way, about their speed and their revolutions relative to each other and whatever else happened to them in whatever way and at any time. That each active or passive condition is better. For I never would have thought that Anaxagoras, who incidentally wrote the original Star Wars script, who indeed asserted that these selves that have been under the direction of mind would bring in any cause for selves other than that selves are best maintained in this way, just as they have to be. Okay. I'm getting this word here. There are certain keywords that I want to know myself because they might be significant. They have to be.
Έχει.
Eki. Eki means okay, that's not helping. Okay, not that one. Yeah. Have to be. Now I'm wondering if this word is tied with has. Oh yeah, it's just have. Has. Ekis. Okay, it keeps telling me it's a snake. Eki. Let's try this one. Alright, I can't see anything. I thought maybe it's to do with the first cause or something, but no, it's just have to be. Then, once he assigned the cause to each and all things in common, I thought he would go on to thoroughly explain the very best for each self. The common good. Bringing in the idea of the good. For all. Now that's cool. So, by going from physical, adding and subtracting of physical stuff, behaviorism, stoicism, Aristotelianism, modernism, to the next level, where both psychology, philosophy, and I guess spirituality are now at. We're literally awakening this, and its influences are slowly changing all of those traditions. into mind opens up the idea of best, most excellent, and therefore a paradigm to award balloons, to arrange things necessarily, but also good. You need to have mind to have something called good. Of course, yeah, if you reject mind as the knowers in current society, side B, lovers of opinion and lovers of fighting, philodoxia and philonikos, they reject being and understanding, so therefore they say there is no good. Might makes right. Of course, that's insane. But, people want to pretend they know what's good so they can pretend to be the knower, which is the shadow, the appeal of the imitation of true wisdom. But, so because we have the idea of nous, we can introduce the idea of good. So he would show what's the best for each self. So there's the ideal, and therefore the common good. So therefore, if there is a good for each individual one, there should be a common good or an archetype for good itself. And I would not have given up my hopes for a fortune. So again, he's not a lover of riches, philokrimatos. He's a lover of learning. So he's saying, this is what I was like as a kid. I loved learning more than money. So I was very eagerly acquired his books, reading them as quickly as I was able to, in order to know the very best and the inferior as quickly as I was able to. Wow. Race to the finish line. Right? Kind of admirable. He wants to get there. Surely then, that wonderful hope was taken away, O companion, and gone from me from the first time that I proceeded to read, since I saw the man made no use of intellect, nor did he assign it any responsibility for the management of the realities. Interesting. If there was something that causes, it should manage. Something should be keeping an eye on things, right? But charge the causes air, ether, water, and many other absurd causes. And he seemed to me to be affected in the same way as one who would say that the actions of Socrates would be due to intellect. But then, in trying to explain the causes of each thing that I do, first says that I am now sitting here through these causes. Right? This is the sort of person would look at me, Socrates, and say, my actions are because of intellect, and the reason I'm sitting here is because of my body is composed out of bones and sinews, and the bones are solid and are separated by joints from each other. And the sinews are such as to stretch and relax, surrounding the bones along with the flesh and skin, by which they are held together. Thus, as the bones are hung in the sockets that slacken and tighten by the sinews, I suspect, and enable me to bend my joints as I do at the present time, and that through this cause I happen to be sitting here with my legs crossed together. Right? It's an in-depth physical explanation of bones and sinews and stuff. And in turn he mentions the other causes concerning our discourse with each other, such as sounds and air and hearing and countless other causes, while thoroughly failing to mention as the actual cause that ever since it appeared better to the Athenians for me to be condemned, and truly through this it has appeared better to me in turn to sit here, and that it was more just to remain here to undergo the sentence they should order. Otherwise, as it seems to me, at least, by the dog, by Hermes, by the dog is an expression he would use. By the dog, Hermes, the god of travelers. Long ago, these sinews and bones would have been on their way towards Megara or Boita. Oh my goodness. My mouse is being silly again. Why? Why is it doing that? Boita, being carried by the opinion of what is the best course. If I did not know that it was more just and more beautiful to undergo any sentence the city may order instead of running away and escaping. So he was let down. He suffered a blow from Anaxagoras. Because he said, he started by saying it's all arranged by mind, but then he went back into the physical. Kind of like Aristotle, if you think about it. So he said, Socrates, his actions would be due to his intellect, his nous. But what are the causes for him sitting here? Oh, well, he sits here because his bones are joined to his shoulder and his legs and they're crossed and they're sinews. That's why he's sitting here. And also, the reason he's sitting here is because he can hear sounds with his physical senses. And that makes noises. Oh, yeah. And that's, so he's sitting here listening because of sounds in the air and by hearing. So completely missing the mark, because Socrates is saying, hey, the real reason, the actual cause I'm here is, I think it is more just. Why is my mouse doing that? Oops, still not great. Here we go. More just. And we have Dikaios. Dikaios is the Greek word for justice. And Kalion, beautiful. The reason he's sitting here isn't his bones and his sinews and his muscles and his joints. He thinks it's more just and beautiful to undergo the sentence the city has ordered him to undergo. Because it appeared to the Athenians better. It appeared better to the Athenians for him to be condemned. And this is a big puzzle. Because they're wrong. It's Socrates. He has the art of the logos. The only one probably who does. It's not better for him to be condemned. But, so the one question is, why does Socrates go along with it? Okay, so he's saying, well, one cause is it appeared better. So this idea of what's better, which is to do with mind, what's better for it, what's better, what did he say? What's better and better, most excellent. Yeah, better, excellent, okay. So one cause is they thought it's better to kill Socrates. So that's why he's here. If they didn't use their mind, nous, to judge according to what's their concept of what's good, and therefore most excellent and better for this person, then I wouldn't be here. But also, if it also appeared better to me to sit here and more just. So he's using beauty and justice and good, because good is what makes things better. So beauty, justice against the good. So good is the excellence or the ideal, and therefore justice and beauty are relative to that, or are judged according to that. To remain here and to undergo the sentence they order. So for both the Athenians and Socrates, better is what they're judging on. Now, he doesn't say the Athenians have an idea of justice and beauty, but he does. So they have the appearance, so that it appeared better to them. So they are motivated by image thinking or ignorance. But even though it's appearance, it's still appearance of what's good. Just like what we have been talking about. Oops. Here, vices aren't the absence of virtue, it's the appearance. Our early parents or priests or early teachers appeared to be good, appeared to be wise and knowing. Everyone, your next door neighbor, his parents when he was young appeared to be good. The guy in a different country, completely different beliefs and prejudices than you, his teacher appeared to be good. Vice is the appearance of virtue. This is fundamental because we can understand and remove problems with the art of the logos. Because he said earlier today, it's the same, what is it? It's the same knowledge to recognize the best and that which is inferior or subordinate. So the same knowledge in the art of the logos recognizes the best and the inferior, the true and its shadow. So confirming what we've been seeing and hypothesizing. So they had the appearance of the good, motivating them. So that's their cause. So saying, why is Socrates in prison? Oh, because the noises of the mouth of the Athenians made these sounds, and their bones in their jaw made their mouth go like this. That's stupid. Behaviorism, right? Stoicism. Modern philosophy in the Latin tradition. It's not the physical things. They moved their mouth in that way because they thought it was better. They had the appearance of better to them. But for Socrates, it appeared better to him and more just to remain and undergo their sentence. Otherwise, the bones and sinews these sinews and bones would be moving his ass towards Megara or Boeotia. Would be making their way to Megara. So why is Socrates in prison? Oh, because of his bones. That's why he's sitting in prison. His bones and his... Well, no. If I thought it was more just to do something else, my bones and sinews would be moving my ass to Megara or Boeotia. If I did not know that it was more just and more beautiful to undergo the sentence the city may have ordered instead of running away and escaping. But on the one hand, to call such things causes is quite absurd. But if someone said that without such things, and bones and sinews and other things I have, I would not be able to do that which appeared proper to me. So he is saying appearance and opinion in relation to him. He's also including the idea of knowledge and justice and beauty. So Socrates is not blind to appearance and opinion, but it's integrated with knowledge. He does trust the logos, but he has higher reasons. It's not just trust, as it is for Simmias and Cebes. So if you did not have bones and sinews and things, I would not be able to do what appeared proper to me. That'd be right. But surely to say it is because of this logos that I do what I do, and I do these things with intelligence, but not with a view to that which is best, would be the logos of a prodigiously indifferent way. What? For since they are not able to discern on why the cause is... Oh, my mouse. why they are not able to discern why the cause is in reality one entity, whereas, oh my god, I hate this on the other hand stuff. That the good without which the cause would not ever be a cause is another. Okay, so there's a class, there's a hierarchy. Yes, of course, I wouldn't be able to sit if I didn't have bones and sinews that allowed me to sit. But to not say that without the good, they wouldn't even be a cause. And by the way, with a view to that which is best. Kind of makes sense. We do what we think is best for ourselves. So that's why evil falls down. We don't do bad things because we love evil. We want to hurt ourselves. Yes, we do it because we think it's best. We just have to do work and to purify ourselves from our ignorance and learn this, the art of the Logos, to be able to actually know, prove, define through the Logos, and artfully use the truth about what is good and best. And that which the majority truly appear to me to do, just as if they were groping in the dark, when they call opinion a cause, thus imposing a foreign name to it. And for which reason surely then one man surrounds the earth with a vortex under heaven to make the earth remain securely in its place, while another stretches out the air to overlook it as if it were a wide abyss. But since they neither investigate the power by which selves are now disposed in the best possible way, nor do they believe it has a daemonic force, okay, this is finally a return to that key word. Socrates was most daemon-like. That's been dropped once or twice. What the heck is this daemon? Because hey, because he has a daemon, this is why they thought it was good to kill him. But daemon is something higher. What is the daemon? Let's keep reading, but this is a puzzle we have. A daemonic force. To do with power. Okay? They don't investigate the power by which they are disposed in the best possible way. By which they are now in the best possible way, nor do they believe it has a demonic force. Okay, so these might be two different things. Demonic force, daemon, the voice of the self, through which we communicates the Logos from the divine for our benefit, through which providence, the quieter voice that we need to attune ourselves to, and that which we try and become most like through mastering this art of the Logos. That force, along with some sort of power. So we talked about the virtue of phronesis having a kind of eternal power, never losing its power. So maybe that's part of that. Again, questions and hypotheses. These are not answers. We're taking them with us in our quest. They are led to believe that they will find some stronger and more immortal latter-day Atlas to hold everything together even more. They neither believe that the good must truly bind and hold selves together. So they're looking for some physical dude like Atlas, physically holding the world together. The principles and the powers and the forces. It's in science even. Yeah, we recognize there are forces and principles, forces of physics and the natural world. What's holding them together? What's maintaining them? A physical thing? A huge, giant Atlas guy? Atlas is the guy who held the earth on his back? That's absurd. Surely not a physical thing is holding together the forces and powers of our universe. Galacticus, maybe. But Socrates is saying the good, which by the way might be even beyond the idea of the good. in being, must truly bind and hold selves together. That's curious. And of course we have hold selves together. So there's the 3 level. Hold it together. Hold what? The physical world together. Hold selves together. Hold selves and being together. And the ultimate. Is the good that which binds and holds the one self together? Or the selves and being? Or the physical world? Or all 3? That's the question. That's the reading that you can only have with the word self in there. But again, hypotheses, questions to take with us. I would have gladly become the disciple of anyone who may have possessed in some way, at some time, that kind of cause. But since I was deprived of this, and neither did I myself discover this, nor did I happen to learn of such a nature from another, do you wish for me to give you a demonstration of the search which I busied myself in, my second quest for the causes, OCBs? So this was Socrates' first quest for the causes. He started by looking at the physical world, then he came across Anaxagoras' idea, no, it's mind. Then he was let down. Now, of course, thankfully, he didn't end up hating the Logos, but recognized it was a lack of his learning. So he didn't fall into that worst condition of the soul. But he's saying, hey, even those who talk about mind, they quickly fall back down into the physical world. They look for physical things again. Bones and sinews. No, I'm not here because I got bones and sinews. I'm here because I think it's good for me to be here. It's most beautiful and just to obey the orders. And they sent me here because they have the appearance of what's best in sentencing me to death. It's all about what's good, just, beautiful, best. And he's saying, by the way, there's something holding all of these things together. Justice, beauty, goodness, at the level of selves, and all of the forces of the physical world. So you can't look to the physical world to that which keeps together the physical world. You can't look to the physical world that which keeps together the being world. That's the good. Now, metaphysically in philosophy, the good is the same as the one or the self. I mean, there's a puzzle there, but generally speaking, there's the ultimate, which is the one self or the good self. There's the realm of being, self-ousia, or self-justice, self-beauty. And there's the world of becoming. Physical things, bones and sinews. So he was let down. What do you think is a giant immortal god holding everything together with his muscles? A giant Andrew Tate? A giant lobster, says Jordan Peterson. No, I was let down by that. But I couldn't find somebody else who gave me that kind of cause. No one was talking about the good. We talked about, hey, our perception of the image of the good, the appearance of the good, motivated the Athenians. Right now, my knowledge of the good and its aspects of beauty and justice is why I'm staying here. But ain't no one talking about that. Just like right now. Who's talking about this? How many people use, by the way, thumbs up, we call that the Aristotelian causes, the physical causes to explain things. But who's talking about the real causes? Hopefully you're here because you've experienced something similar to Socrates. There is no one talking about that. So where am I going to look? Let's look to Socrates, because he came across it. That's why we're here. We're looking for a way of understanding us, why we do what we do. That doesn't just point to our physical body, because our soul isn't physical. Our soul can leave the body, and it will. So we're looking for a greater cause for us to live justly and beautifully, to act in a good way, what's best for ourselves in this life and the next. So we can't look to physics. We can't look to Petersons or behaviorists or modern psychologists or even modern Aristotelian philosophers and Stoics. We can't. Hopefully that's one of the reasons what brought you here. And Socrates is saying, this is my story too. So now let's read that now that we've got some key terms, daemon, selves are being bound together, the good, justice and beauty. Now that we've got those key terms, let's read the other translation and see if it flows a bit better. Now that we have the key terms in our back pocket. Okay. So, I thought, so the intelligence. So Anaxagoras talked about intelligence being a cause. So I thought that he would assign the cause of each thing and all things in common. The common good is the text. He would go on to explain what is the best for each. And okay, here we go. What is good for all in common? I prized my hopes very highly, and I seized the books very eagerly and read them as fast as I could, that I might know as fast as I could about the best and the worst, the ideal and the deviation, the ladder up and its shadow, perfection of our destiny, purification from our fate. Okay, all the way through, it's that same pair, that same dyad in our skill tree of twos. My glorious hope, my friend, was quickly snatched away from me as I went on with my reading and saw that the man made no use of intelligence. Boo! No. Boo! And did not assign real causes to the ordering of things, but mentioned as causes air and ether and water and many other absurdities. And it seemed to me it was very much as if one should say that Socrates does with intelligence what he does, and then, in trying to give the causes of the particular thing I do, should say that I am now sitting here because my body is composed of bones and sinews, and the bones are hard and have joints, and divide them among the sinews, and they can be contracted and relaxed, and with the flesh, the skin contains them all, and they're laid about by the bones, and so the bones are hung loose in their ligaments and the sinews, and by relaxing and contracting, they make me able to bend my limbs now, and that's the cause of me sitting here. And that's the cause of me sitting here with my legs bent. Or as if in the same way he should give voice and air and hearing and countless other things of that sort as the causes for us talking with each other. Why are you talking? Oh, because of air. That's why we're talking. And, molecules. Yeah, molecules. Particles. Does this sound familiar to us? Maybe we start there, we start learning in this kind of a way. This is kind of what's offered to us at school. This is how you can understand things. What's understanding? Seeing the ordering and also the causes. That's how you understand things. You just understand the cause of things. It's a bug in my house. What's the cause of there being a bug in my house? That's why we talked. And they failed to mention the real causes, which are that the Athenians decided it was best to condemn me, and therefore I have decided that it was best for me to sit here, and that it was right for me to stay and undergo the penalty, whatever penalty they order. Okay? The word is justice. He's using justice as his guide. Why? For by the dog, I fancy these bones and sinews in mind would have been in Megara or Boeotia long ago. carried thither by an opinion of what was best, if I did not think it was better and nobler, more just and beautiful, to endure any penalty the city may inflict, rather than to escape and run away. But it is most absurd to call things of that sort causes. If anyone were to say that I could not have done what I thought proper if I did not have bones and sinews and other things I have, sure, he would be right. But to say that those things are the cause of my doing what I do, and that I act with intelligence, but not from the choice of what is best, the choice of what is best being the more primary cause, would be extremely careless. Would be an extremely careless way of talking. Whoever talks in that way is unable to make a distinction. It can't make a distinction. What distinction? And to see that in reality a cause is one thing, and the thing without which the cause could never be a cause is quite another thing. So there's a cause and a thing that's a condition for a cause, or a cause for a cause, a higher degree. So we've been talking about in the dialectic, one of the movements from division to synthesis analysis, step 3 to step 4 in our 4 steps of the dialectic, is what idea is most causal. Midwifery, what was the scene that is most causal? What's most primary in your life to do with your personal problem, in your shadow, or in terms of the ideas? What's the more causal idea you should pursue in philosophy? So yeah, of course, we need bones to sit here, but that's not the cause. It's a kind of cause. There's a much greater cause. Now, because of this logos that I do. So in the text we just read, the cause is one entity, whereas that without which the cause would never be a cause is another. Right, so in our text here, cause is one thing, and that without which a cause could never be a cause is another. And he's saying that's the good. So it seems like the good is a condition for causes. So even in his, yeah, okay, you need bones and stuff, but even his decision that this is what's best requires the good. For an idea of what's best for Socrates that the Athenians use, or what's best for Athens, there has to be the conditions for best. Because best is a goodness applied to a particular. So for there to be a goodness, there has to be the idea of good. So it's a condition for the causes. Equally so for Socrates' idea of what's best is more nuanced because he has knowledge and phronesis and nous. So he can discern, oh, it's more just and more beautiful. So he can discern the aspects of goodness. But for there to be justice and beauty within goodness, there has to be the conditions for the cause of even goodness. So it's 2 steps removed. Those in the physical world are 2 steps removed. They talk about physical causes, but they don't talk about the idea of what's best. So hey, if I thought it would be best for me to be somewhere else, my bones and sinews would be running my ass off to these other places. So it can't be the bones and sinews. But even that, for there to be the best or the most just and most beautiful, these are all aspects in relation to good. What is best for me is another way of saying what is the good about me. Beauty has to be something good. Just has to be what's good. So here is an interesting thing. He might be slipping this in. It might be over the heads of the people he's talking to, but it's not over our heads. Okay, the cause is one thing, whereas that without which a cause could never be a cause is another. So he might be distinguishing two levels above becoming, above the physical. Best, justice, beauty, and maybe, which is a more primary cause. That's why he's here. He thinks it's best. The Athenians think it's best. He thinks it's more just and beautiful. But that without which it could not even be a cause is another. So maybe Socrates was seeing two levels in which Anaxagoras was letting him down. Let's keep reading. Again, hypothesis. Both could fit. Maybe it's a 3 level, maybe it's just 2. Seems to me to be more like 3, but let's keep reading. And so it seems to me that most people, when they give the name of cause to the latter, are groping in the dark, as it were, and are giving it a name that does not belong to it. And so one man makes the earth stay below the heavens by putting a vortex around it, and another regards the earth as flat, as a flat trough is supported on a foundation of air. But they do not look for the power which causes things to be now placed as it is best for them to be placed. Whether you think it's a round earth supported by that vortex or a flat earth on supported by a foundation of air. What made it that way? What decided it was best for it to be that way? Nor do they think it has any divine force. What about if something's causing the physical world, it has to be non-physical or divine? But they think they can find a new Atlas, a physical thing, physical dude, more powerful and more immortal and more all-embracing than this. And in truth, they give no thought to the good, which must embrace and hold together all things. That's that third level. There's a level of the divine, but even the divine is thinking it's best for it to be. So even the divine intelligence, or the before physical or metaphysical, is using goodness or most appropriate or best or most just and beautiful in its decision making to make the world flat or round. In other words, there has to be something holding those ideas together for even the divine to use. The causes is one thing, but the condition for causes is an altogether another. And he's saying it's the good that holds all that together, which is fascinating because today we were talking about the principle that all is in self, from self and returns to self. Therefore, the Greek maxim, know thyself, placing self beyond God or the divine, which is one reason why religious people get in a tizzy about philosophy, because you don't have to prove that you have a self. It's beyond belief, because of course you've got a self. You don't have to. I don't have to convince you that you have a self. But a religious person has to knock door to door and convince you that the Mormon God is real or whatever. Therefore, suffer through their faith. You don't need that for the self. So the self, and we talked about how, hey, there's the world of becoming, the world of being, and the world of the one self. That's Parmenides' first hypothesis, but another way of talking about it is the good self. So the one, the good, or the self are 3 words that kind of apply to that third realm. The dimension that even holds together the ideas in being. Because if there's a divine acting, well, he has to have power. He has to be looking to the good. He has to have reasons. So even at this early age, he was able to reason all that himself. And therefore say, oh, this teacher, who's better than the other physics teachers who talk about only physical principles, because he's introducing mind, and obviously, the causes for our action is not just our physical bones and sinews, so this guy is better, but Socrates was being able to reason, oh, even this guy falls down. He falls back into the physical world, from that realm of mind, and he doesn't go to the higher realm of the good. And it is the good which must embrace and hold all things together. Now, I would gladly be the pupil of anyone who would teach me the nature of such a cause. But since that was denied me, and I was not able to discover it myself, or learn it from anyone else, do you wish me, Cebes, to give you account of the way in which I have conducted my second voyage in quest of the cause? So this is his first voyage. Now, interesting metaphor, because the reason one cause for Socrates not being put to death right now is there was a voyage of a boat in memory and celebration of the voyage that Theseus made to slay the Minotaur in honor of Apollo, the god of purification and philosophy. So it's a purification ceremony in honor of Apollo, the god of philosophy, in celebration for Theseus, who slayed the Minotaur in the middle of a labyrinth. So that's the mythology. Now, can you piece it together? How does that relate to what we've been learning? How would that mythologize or represent through drama and analogy what we've been doing here? What do you think? And this is a big question. Did Socrates reach the ultimate cause of the good? And how did he get there? Because we have been talking about how we can go from philomethesis, lover of learning, following this part of our soul, to a love of wisdom, so apply our learning from the world of becoming to the realm of being. But he's saying, hey, these are causes. Justice, beauty, what's best. But there has to also be a condition for causes that he's calling the good. So here's our triangle of, notice, 3 parts of the soul, microcosm, and the macrocosm of the good. Let's move it over a little bit. The good. Being. Or no, he's calling it mind. And becoming. Or let's say being. Being. Or the physical. Sinews and bones. Or the world of becoming. So there's a nice triad for us to add to our list, to add to our skill tree. And he said, hey, most people are stuck here, like Aristotle, like our modern philosophers. Some people recognize there's a realm of being, but even Anaxagoras drops into this most of the time. And he needs to recognize, hey, don't use this to explain that. There must be a condition for these to be the greatest causes. So even before somebody else shared this with him, Socrates was able to reason well enough to see the flaws in those around him, as hopefully many of you here watching this have done, which has brought you here now, today. And Socrates said, hey, there was something which brought me from there to there, something which told me that even there wasn't good enough, or these two together wasn't good enough. I couldn't find it in anyone else, so I had to search for it myself. So we're going to see if he got there, if he really perfected philosophy, if he really reached the highest fulfilled his purpose, learned what he needed to do as a human being. And if his art of the logos that he's sharing with us contains all of it, or if it's lacking, I expect he probably got there. I expect this art of the logos is the best. Contains not just physical causes, but the real cause, the more real causes, or the more causal causes, and the condition for causes. That which we're seeking, if we can say the good is the self, and our goal is to know thyself, we can say, hey, this is our destiny. How did Socrates get from where he was to discovering and reaching the destiny of man? Did he do it? How did he do it? And how can we do it if we are to follow him, match him, and master the art of the logos? His second quest for causes. How did he do it? How old did he do it? On that cliffhanger, and on that bombshell, thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you got puzzled about a lot of things. And I hope to see you next time. Feel free to follow on Twitch, like and subscribe on YouTube, join the Discord if you want, and share your work, thoughts, insights, understanding. And if there's a Patreon, feel free to support the channel if you think this is worth doing and sharing and maintaining. And there should be other perks for you on the Patreon channel as soon as it's up. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this quest. I hope you're sufficiently puzzled as we are, and Owen is. Wow. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.
Systems are now fully operational.
Okay, that was the wrong button. Hope to see you next time.